The Thinking Tackle Podcast.
Welcome to the Thinking Tackle Podcast. Joining me today in the studio is one of carp fishing's most recognisable big carp anglers. But over recent years, there's been a gradual shift in his fishing and his decision to actually make a career from carp fishing. Gaz Fareham, welcome to the podcast. We're live. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No
Pleasure
worries.
to be here.
So what are these changes?
Oh, well, I mean, where to start, I suppose, really. So up until about 3 years ago now, I was working as a secondary school art and photography teacher. And for a kind of long list of reasons, really, that had sort of just come to a natural end, shall we say. It was sort of just, time for a change. And carp fishing was obviously, the obvious thing to do. It's something that I've kind of teetered around the edges of being involved with on a kind of a much bigger level for a really long time, really, since I was at uni back in sort of the early 2000s. Started writing features back then and, doing photography, for magazines and so on and so forth. But I'd kind of never really wanted to make a living from it. I'd always, lots of my friends over the years have done. Lots of them have gone on to do really good and great things with companies. But I'd never really wanted to make my passion into my job. I always wanted to keep it slightly separate. But finally I just decided, that now was the time. And I think, lots of the skills and stuff I think that I'd learned through my time teaching and stuff as well. And, the involvement I'd had with art and photography and design and everything else could be put to really good use with sort of some carp fishing projects. So subsurface sort of being the main thing really that I'm working on currently. That's been sort of 8 or 9 years probably now that I've been working on that, but it had always been alongside my teaching. So just as and when I could fit it in, weekends, evenings, that sort of thing. So having more time to invest in that now just is a completely different prospect, really.
Because you've sort of gone full circle a little bit, haven't you? You've gone very commercial and then you've gone out of it.
Yep.
I mean, why the decision to suddenly come back to it?
I think, I don't know, really. I mean, a couple of reasons. Like I say, I always imagined that I would be a 50, 60-year-old art teacher, with the cords and the jumper and stuff, still teaching art. That was really what I always wanted to do, and perhaps even still will go back into at some point. I really miss it. I always imagined that I'd do an MA, perhaps go on and do a PhD or whatever afterwards, and end up teaching in a college or lecturing or something like that. That was what I wanted to do, have my own art practice and so on and so forth. But Was it a particularly difficult decision? Or? Yeah, it was, and it sort of took like 3 or 4 years really of just kind of the teaching just getting harder and harder and harder, just through the nature of the beast these days. It just got more and more stressful. It was just putting more of a it was having a really detrimental effect, I think, on my health, actually, if I'm totally honest. I was suffering really badly with anxiety and stress because of it, and just couldn't really ever see that changing.
You've mentioned before. That, teachers nowadays. There's so many demands on them. Is it a common thing in teaching?
It is, which is just such a shame because I still think education is just fundamentally so important, and I think it's just a real shame that that the teaching trade isn't supported better, really, and kind of. More allowances are made to make the workload more manageable, but just because of financial pressures and stresses and everything else, it's everyone is struggling to make ends meet, including the schools, really.
And we said as well. It's it's at the detriment to the students. To the students as well. It's to have a constant turnover of inexperienced teachers is
from my experience. All the teacher or the vast majority of the teachers I worked with would always put the students first. So you would do everything you could to help the students and to make sure their work was, if I had to stay behind until 7:30 to manage a big studio shoot, then I would. You don't get paid anymore for that. There's no allowances. If I still then had to go home and do a load of marking or whatever, you would just do it because you wanted the students' work to be as good as possible. So, I think as a definitely general rule of thumb, teachers always put the students and their experience first as opposed to their own health, which is why I think you see lots of teachers burn out. And I think it's a pretty familiar story, really. So, so anyway, like I say, I just kind of decided that I'd, come to the end, as did Sarah, my wife, who she was teaching at the same place. We both left at the same time, and she used to lead the art department and I led the photography department. And so I started doing a bit of work for Sticky and Thinking, which was who I was sponsored by back then. They sort of welcomed having me on board on a on a slightly kind of larger scale, really, to do stuff. And I knew it would give me some time to invest in subsurface as well, which is, like I say, always been sort of on the back burner, but it's always something that I've really wanted to push and do properly. So it just seemed like the perfect opportunity, really, to finally get into that.
Interestingly as well, because you said that you didn't necessarily want to work in front of the camera anyway. You wanted to sort of do a more of a background job.
Yeah, I still feel like that now, and I think in a couple of years that's where I'd like to be. Like really, I'd prefer to be in Kev Wyatt's shoes.
Would you?
Often, yeah, totally, because Kev's the one out there filming, shooting pictures. He's sort of at the front lines of the creative act. And I think I'm just I'm a practical person. I like doing things. I don't like sitting pushing emails around, being inside, being behind a desk or what have you. And so I think and I think also all the other pressures that come with being in front of the camera. I do enjoy it.
Do you see yourself as quite a big commodity in carp fishing as well?
You're best just not to think about any of those things.
But I mean, for the companies, I mean, obviously, it's quite a lucrative, to have you on board representing a company. I'd imagine is quite useful for them.
I guess so. I mean, I think just for your own kind of state of mind, I think you're better just not to, or at least to try not to worry too much about any of those things, and just focus on doing what you do. And if the byproduct of that is that it's good for whoever you're involved with, then then great, I think. But I think it's always dangerous if you start to believe your own hype or whatever, isn't it? You know what I mean? You never want to be in that position.
Well, you said as well with campaigns and how you're going about your fishing at the moment. You've learnt to see a different perspective, to carp fishing in general as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I was I've brought it along today. Same as huge amount of people of my generation.
So we got a copy of In Pursuit of the Largest there. I was really fortunate to be involved with doing the drawings for it as well. So it was, for me, it became even more personal because I felt like I was connected to the book because I was actually in it. Some of my drawings were in it, which was hilarious, really, because I was only 18, I think, when I did them. How well did you know Terry at the time?
I didn't know him really at all. It was just through Jamie Smith, his friend. There's a sort of funny story sort of behind it, really, but I just sort of come to know Jamie. Jamie had shown some of my drawings that I'd done for him to Terry, and Terry was in the process of putting the book together. Just picked up the phone, old school style, because it was 1998. It would have been, I think, or
98, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, he was putting it together the year before, and I just got a phone call one evening. I was just sat on the sofa. I was like just a scratty little Manchester kid. I didn't know anyone in carp fishing at all.
Did you know a lot about Terry Hearn at the time?
Well, he was only writing in Big Carp back then. I'd read a few of his articles and really, really enjoyed them. There was just something different about them, the way he wrote, how he talked about carp fishing, his photos. I knew there was just something a bit different, and he was a bit younger. A lot of the guys back then were a bit older and a bit crustier, and it was a bit more old-fashioned, whereas Tail was a bit younger. And I think I just identified a bit more with him. He was kind of, he was wearing skate trainers and, baggy joggers and rough old hoodies and stuff. And I don't know, he just felt different to a lot of the other guys out there doing it. So, literally just the phone's gone one evening. My dad's picked it up and he's like, "Son, it's for you." I was like, "Who is it?" He's like, "I don't know, some Cockney geezer called Terry."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Hello?" He's like, "Oh, hello mate, it's Terry Hearn." And yeah, that was that. Did the drawings.
And you said subsequently, I mean, your whole perspective on carp fishing was around
completely
that big fish scene.
Up until that point, it had been really inspired by Tim Paisley and his writings about all the northern meres and all that sort of thing. And then In Pursuit just kind of completely shaped and defined what I wanted to do with my fishing. And I think also for a whole generation, no two ways about it. I think almost everybody I know would cite that book as a milestone in how they then went on to think about carp fishing. Just from a kind of the mindset of big carp fishing, that idea of fishing for a small family of carp in a low stock water, spending your whole life being absorbed and involved in that. There was something just really deeply romantic, I think, and beautiful about that idea.
So having sort of lived through all of that and done some similar stuff yourself, I mean, if you were reading that book now, I mean, would that sort of fishing have the same impact on you?
Well, I mean, yes and no. I can still read it now and be completely absorbed in the romance of that, the chase for one big fish, that idea of target fishing. But I've finally accepted that I just haven't got the time and resources to do it. I think over the course of the last sort of 20 years, I suppose, I've had very short spells, maybe for a couple of months or something like that at most, where I've lived a little bit of that dream, where most of my life has revolved around it. And I've done quite well in those spells when I've really applied myself, and I can get to the lakes as often as I possibly can, whether it's to bait up or to look or to prep or whatever, or and that sort of fishing just kind of demands that from you, I think, really.
But you've always said that fishing is secondary to other things in your life.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. But for the vast majority of my life, fishing's always been secondary to sort of work and often other things as well. When I was growing up, I used to race bikes, and that always came first because there was a lot invested in the bike racing. We had a van. We used to go for the full weekends because we'd be traveling all over the country. The race circuit was like an every weekend sort of thing, and you were building up points towards an end of season result and all that. And because at that point I was still too young to drive, obviously I was completely reliant on my dad for lifts to the lake or whatever. So the bikes and the racing always came first. Fishing fitted in between. And really, for the vast majority of my life, up until the last sort of year or so, fishing's always come second or third. After family, home life, work, and then fishing, really. But
you said how much of an effort that you put into to everything. But I mean, so when you're not fishing, I mean, is fishing still part of your thought process, even though you're not necessarily doing it?
It is, and it's funny, really. I've had a bit of a love-hate relationship, I think, with carp fishing over the years, because partly I think because of the sort of fishing that I've always I did always want to do. I knew how much resources that takes. 2-3 nights a week, 4 if you can give it, 5 if you're really lucky, or whatever, and everything else that goes with that. It's a really sort of selfish, in a way, pursuit, I think, and to commit yourself to that, I think is a really big thing. And so I've kind of for the vast majority of my life, I just haven't really felt like I could really commit to that, unless it was in really short spells, and I'd be like, right, for the next sort of 6 weeks, I'm going to pull all the stops out. I'm going to do everything I can to get down, the lake once or twice maybe during the week, prepping bait, looking, so on and so forth, to sort of try and get a result out of that, out of that few weeks fishing. But to be fair, I don't really think I'm alone in that at all. A lot of my friends fish like that these days as well, especially ones that have got lots more commitments. They'll fish hard for a short spell until maybe they'll catch a big one, or they'll just get to the point where they're like, I've hung it out too long. I've got to get back home and sort out life, and
I mean, do you look back at your sort of campaign fishing, and can you honestly say that you've enjoyed every single campaign that you fished on?
No, not at all. I don't think you do enjoy all of it. I think don't get me wrong, like I definitely don't regret in any way, shape or form like any of the campaigns that I've done, but by nature there's a lot of downtime in a campaign. If you're fishing somewhere for a year or two and you're doing a couple of nights a week or whatever, you're spending a lot of time somewhere, and by nature that sort of big carp fishing is slow. It's a battle of attrition and kind of grit and determination half the time. That's why I've listened to Daryl talk numerous times about his carp fishing, and he is so driven, like that grit and that bottom line determination that he's got, like at all costs, like he is catching that fish.
Do you feel like that? Do you feel similar to Daryl when you're actually at it there? You fairly similar kind of approach to it.
Yeah, but I've sometimes. But I think when I've really got to the point where I know that I'm letting other things slip, I'm letting relationships slip at home, or I've just got a shitload of work to do that I've been putting off, or it was just getting too difficult to keep up with work at school and make sure I was doing it properly. You've got a big responsibility as a teacher that has to come first, and as soon as you start slipping down the rabbit hole of kind of thinking that I need to get an extra 2 or 3 bait ups in this week because it's a new moon next week, like you're fucked. You can't live like that for long. You like little short spells, you can just about hang it out, and that was usually what I'd do like a really hard 2 or 4, 5 weeks or something, not doing loads of time. It would only be a night or 2 a week, but maybe with some prep and stuff as well, whatever, catch a good one or catch one or have a little result, and then kind of go back and have a little recoup, spend 2, 3, 4 weeks, sorting stuff out at home kind of thing, and then sort of go back from there. But yes, it's keeping,
what's that intensity?
Keeping
keeping the balance.
Keeping balance is difficult, and I'm just, my nature, unfortunately, very much so, is that I like to do things as well as I possibly can. And I find it's a failing, I would say, definitely, that I struggle to enjoy things sometimes unless I feel like I'm doing them at 100%.
Yeah,
I can't just turn up at a lake, drop in any half decent looking swim, put my rods out and kick back. Like
it's a shame you think it's a failing though, isn't it? I mean,
well, I mean, yes and no. Only a failing, and I suppose in so much as for my enjoyment of it. Really, I think it makes you probably more successful over the because even does
it make you question that the whole purpose of actually doing something like that, if it's if it feels like that?
Yeah, just because when it's yeah, I'm not sure actually, and that I don't know actually how to answer that one. No, it's a difficult line to toe. To try and do stuff 100% all the time is a difficult line to toe. For your kind of mental. Your mental state, I think, and to keep everything else going sort of as it is.
Well, recently you said you've teamed up with Topography.
Yes.
And there's been a film out recently.
Yeah. Me and Big Rich Stewart went out to France back in pretty much second week of May, I think it was. In the end, we went out there. We had planned to go a little bit earlier, but the weather, I don't know if you remember, but the weather was atrocious this spring. It was really unseasonably cold, wasn't it? We had loads of high pressure, loads of frosts all the way through April. And we planned originally to go somewhere quite much bigger, like to take on a bit more of a challenge, really. That was the plan. Had sort of 2 or 3 big venues lined up. And I've got a few friends out in that region that I was speaking to, and they were just like, it's just not happening. They were like, my mate's just come back, he's done 8 nights, he's only had 1, he really knows the place as well, and I was like,
would Rich pull the plug on something like that if you really thought that it was going to be?
No, not at all, but I think because they're not working with a huge team or resources in that respect, a kind of there's no recce trips and sort of stuff like that. You're and only going for a week, you've only got a fairly short time frame to make something happen. So I think taking on something really risky in terms of a big venue that's just not right at that time of year, it just wouldn't have been sensible. And at the end of the day, you're making a film, aren't you? So you want to put something out there that's enjoyable and that hopefully people get. They don't want to see you blank for
No.
for a week.
But you still sort of captured the realism and the the rawness, your type of fishing with the venues that you chose. You ended up fishing a couple of different venues.
We did, yeah. The first venue was more than anything, it was just an excuse to catch up with my friend Stefan, who I've wanted to fish with for a couple of years, hadn't happened for one reason or another, and so it was just, he was like, look, there's this big barrage not far from home. I think there's a really good chance that you could catch a couple this time of year. We'll just do a couple of social days, and then you could head on elsewhere from there. So yeah,
we got some nice
first
images.
Couple of days were spent
there's always good
amazing.
pictures with your fishing, Gaz, isn't there?
I mean, absolutely props to Rich Stewart for obviously all these. Not only did Rich film the whole thing single-handedly himself, but he also had a stills camera swinging around his neck most of the time as well, taking stills, and and then a GoPro and a drone in other hands.
Is there very much direction with this, or is it? I mean, are we seeing it pretty much as it is?
We just rolled basically.
Yeah.
Obviously we had a little chat before we went, but I sort of said to Rich, what do you want from this? How do you want to play it? What do you want to do? And he was just like, mate, entirely up to you. He's like, we'll just go fishing and see what happens. He's like, I'm going to leave that to you entirely. And it was filmed in a slightly more sort of off the cuff way, really, because it was just by nature it was single camera, so you haven't got multiple angles and all that sort of thing. So it was just kind of single camera.
Does that help with speed and not having to keep going over stuff as well?
Yeah, because absolutely nothing was staged. There was no kind of set piece shots, if you know what I mean. It was just, the first 2 days were utter carnage. From 10 minutes of getting the first, like the rods in, it was just, and it didn't stop basically for the first 2 days, the whole 2 days. So Rich basically just chased me round with a video camera as best he could.
Did you say you drew most of the fish in the reservoir onto your area then?
No, I just think
you were getting constant bites, weren't you?
So I spoke to Stefan the evening before, and he was like, look, this time of year the fish would usually all be up in the shallow bays, May time, like spawning time in France, really, almost, or at least just kind of pre-spawning, but it was still cold. We had daytime temperatures of like 12 degrees, I think, so it was just nothing, and there'd been no warm weather really at all. I think they'd had like 2 warm days so far. That kind of sums it up. It still looks like it
looks freezing.
Yeah, it looks like winter almost. Well, pretty sure I had a fleece, like a proper thick thermal fleece on. Well, I had like a hoodie, thick thermal fleece, and a big waterproof on, and it wasn't warm. I think it was about 12, 14 degrees or something that first day. But
did it take you very long to find the fish or have some sort of idea about where you were fishing?
Well, so I'm an avid tracker of the weather when I'm fishing. I just do it, I think, because I just enjoy tracking the weather, partly from the sort of my surfing days and stuff as well. I used to track the weather all the time. It was all part of it, and I think with fishing it's sort of very similar. And on a trip I've always got one eye on what the weather is going to do the following day and the day after and the day after that. If there's going to be a big incoming weather front, I'm probably going to want to preempt that and move before that comes in. On some of the big waters where you're using boats and stuff like that, the last thing you want to be doing is moving in the middle of a big wind, because everything is going to be so much harder. Spot finding will be harder, getting your kit to an area might be harder, or whatever. And for these particular 2 days that we were going to be fishing, there was some really big southwest winds forecast and loads of rain, and it's a big open windswept French barrage. They usually get on the wind. It's spring, so in my head I was like, I've got a reasonable idea that they're going to get on the end of that wind. Stefan seemed to think there was a chance that they would as well. So the evening before we started, we went for a look, and we saw sort of 3 or 4 fish show pretty quick that evening, and that was enough for me, I think. Nipped out in the boat quickly, took a couple of markers, I just used little drinks bottle markers with braid wrapped around the end rather than H blocks. The bottles are a little bit more discreet. You can't see them from the bank and stuff. Sometimes the pike anglers, if they spot a H block, they'll just go and grab it and take it, basically. So yeah, the little kind of clear drinks bottles are great. They just don't get noticed. So nipped out in the boat, Had a little donk around just to check what the lake bed was like, and then put about 10 kilo of boilie.
Pretty similar everywhere, was it?
Yeah, it was all hard, firm. I was like, perfect. I had like 10, 15 donks around in an area 20, 30 yards sort of square, like I don't know, maybe like tennis court sort of area. And I was like, yep, that feels sweet. Don't need to overcomplicate this at all. 2 big 5 kilo bags of boilie, and just horsed boilie over a great big spread. Didn't want it to be tight area at all, just wanted a great big spread. And just basically turned back up the following morning, and just punched some. And
you saw fish showing pretty much straight away.
Yeah, saw fish showing pretty much straight away, which was always, it was a good sign. Few of them did look smaller, which I was a bit like, I didn't really know what the stock was. I was like, that looked like a 10 pounder. But then there was like the odd good ones sort of sloshing out and stuff as well. So they were obviously out there. And do you find spreading that bait around as well? It's a useful way of keeping fish in the swimmer, a little bit longer. We can go a little bit over the top at times, can't we? We're centralising too much bait in one area. I mean, the 2 venues that we fished could not have been more different. The second lake that we fished, I was dropping on areas that were barely bigger than this book.
Right. Yeah.
That was the difference. Using an aquascope in like 8-10 foot of like tap clear water, and literally lowering the rig down by hand. Wait until the lead's donked and hit the bottom, and then just donking the lead just to the edge of the spot, watching the hook link lay out, and baiting that precisely over. So I mean, it was like literally pinpoint precision on the second place to the first place. I was pretty much just blatting him anywhere in the region of that bait.
How much of a difference do you think that makes? When you can place those rigs like that, in terms of
it really, it was just the nature of the situation. The barrage, there wasn't a scrap of weed in there. It was just sand and sand and gravel, really, sort of everywhere. Big spread of bait. Just the carp are moving around. You're only going to make things much more difficult for yourself by trying to bait tight. Bait over a great big spread, you're going to pull more fish in, because naturally you're kind of, your baited area is kind of intercepting more fish, basically. And also it means you don't have to be as precise and as accurate. I didn't have to worry if it was absolutely pinpoint, and just blat it back out there, as long as it was in the region of the bottle, because I'd left the bottle markers out so I could still see them from the bank as like visual aids. And so as long as they were in the area. So that was, you sort of followed the brief for the first lake then, didn't you? But I mean, it was just go on there and just, get as many fish as. It was just basically a bit of fun. It was just a bit of good old carp fishing fun, just catching fish. And also we were just coming out of lockdown as well. Yeah. So I hadn't been to Europe for sort of 15, 16 months. Hadn't done a huge amount of fishing, in the run up to it either. So it was just an excuse just to hang out with Stefan, eat some food. So his wife Vanessa each day brought us down a great big pan of like beautiful home cooked food as well, which was just amazing, like beautiful pastries and a bottle of red wine as well every day. So we had like beautiful plates from like glass plates, French plates from home. Big, plate of food, glass of wine. You got the best of everything, haven't you? Yeah, it was just really good fun. Exactly what it was supposed to be. Do you enjoy that day fishing as well? I mean, yeah, it was great. Yeah, because of the COVID restrictions, we weren't allowed to night fish, at this place, and you also had to be off the roads by dark. So we had to leave the venue sort of just before dark and get back to the campsite that we were staying in. So it was perfect, really. And to be honest, I think we caught about 30 fish in a day and a half. It wasn't even really it wasn't even quite a day and a half, because we cut the first day short as well. And I went out in the boat and put a massive hit of bait in, just in the hope that it might bring some of the bigger fish in the following day. So I was catching quite a few smaller ones. And in my head, I was like, what can I do to maybe try and pick a bigger one out? And I was like, give it a massive hit of bait. Perhaps that'll just pull a couple of the big girls in. In hindsight, I think just because of the weather, it just pushed. I think because the weather was so sort of, it was like a big fresh storm front. I think it had just pushed the vast majority of the stock into it just funneled them all into the corner of that barrage, and I was just like, there was absolutely. I mean, if you were trying to target the bigger fish, I mean, would you fish on the edge of those baited areas? Yeah, I mean, I did try that. I tried fishing just off the edges and sort of slightly longer than it, and a couple of things, but it didn't really seem to make a whole lot of difference, in honesty. I just think because they were all males that we were catching, loads of them were milting, and I think because of the time of year, I think the big females were just tucked away somewhere else. I think they probably weren't on the end of the wind. Perhaps I think the big females were maybe.
What sort of size were the big females in there?
They got up to about 60 pounds.
Yeah.
So yeah, we caught them to 43, which I've since found that a sort of like 18 to 20 kilo fish from that place is at, you've done really well actually to catch one like that. So the one we caught on the second day, which I think it was about 2:00 in the afternoon. We were just shredded by that point, and
I bet.
And also we didn't film it, but we got, so basically someone from the not from the guard, but someone from the where were they from, like French heavies, basically. Someone had basically reported us because they thought we were stealing fish, because they'd seen us like with 30 carp, like back and forth with slings and stuff like that. Obviously they don't, it was just someone, there's a couple of cafes behind, so they'd just obviously seen, a couple of English fans and guys walking carp in. Do you
think they're quite used to seeing that sort of thing out there then, Gaz?
Well, obviously not, otherwise I don't think they would have kind of made the call. But yeah, so they'd basically phoned someone, like the regional French police or whatever. So all the heavies turned up, and it all got a bit. Actually had the big mirror in the net at the time.
Right.
And I remember saying to Rich, I was like, "We're not going to get to film this." I was like, "He's going to make us put that back, and we're going to have to pack up and go." And Vanessa, Steph's wife, because they were talking in French, I could pick bits out, but my French obviously isn't that good, but it was clearly heated and not good. And on her phone, like with Google Translate, she's just typed, I forget what the other word was, but basically said deported. I was like,
God.
I was like, Rich, mate, this is not good.
But you hadn't done anything.
We're going home.
Right.
This doesn't look good. Because I was like, is it COVID? Is it what? I was like, could have been all sorts.
But they're really hot on that stuff out there then. I mean, they are, that's
yeah, they've got to be, unfortunately. Yeah. I think, I mean, the public waters are really, they're left to their own devices, and they're at the sort of mercy of whatever happens, really, which unfortunately is why some of them have been pillaged in the past. But I mean, that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, anyway, so thankfully, he didn't notice that we still had one in the net, because the net was just sort of propped like you do. He didn't notice that. So once he'd gone, we filmed that one, did a close, and I think it was like 3:00 by that point or something, and we were like, this is a good in. It's a mega fish. It's like big, lovely, steely grey, sort of, like low mid 40 or whatever it was. I was like, let's just call it quits and get out of there.
Yeah.
And that's all part of the joys of filming.
Did you say you had a couple of disasters out there while you were out on that trip?
Yeah. Smashed my van up when we got to the next place as well, which it cost me about $1,000. That did. Smashed all my Sportline bumpers off my transporter.
How'd you do that?
Just like hucking down this path that was sort of, it was a little bit tight, but it was fine. It was a little bit wet, so I had to have a little bit of sort of speed about me, basically. And I've got down the path fine, came to a fallen tree across the path, realised couldn't get any further, but because I was sort of stuck in the path, there was nowhere to sort of spin round and come out, so I had to reverse out. But because of the way, it was hard to describe, but basically I just smashed like a massive hole in the back bumper and ripped the front bumper off as well.
It wouldn't be a trip away, would it? If it
wouldn't be a trip away without being stuck, or every trip I ever went on with Samir, we got stuck at some point, or a punch up. But all that kind of stuff just makes it. It just adds to the
But then the second venue you went to as well. I mean, that was an entirely different water.
Completely, yeah. Much more English style, if you like. That first one was a classic French reservoir. The second one was just like this incredible gravel pit. Tap clear, top to bottom weed, even in May, top to bottom weed over like 95 to 98% of the lake. You could see the bottom over pretty much the whole thing. It was just incredible. Like,
could you see how the fish were reacting to lines and stuff in there? Because it's absolutely gin clear, that place, isn't it?
It is, and I mean, I didn't actually see any fish from the boat at all. Like, the only thing I saw a couple of times was there was huge areas where the weed was to the surface, and a couple of times I've just seen the like big deep rock in the weed and just the weed sort of swaying like this, and it was obvious I'd spooked one with the boat, but other than that didn't see hide and a hair of a fish. I don't think I saw one show either, didn't see any shows either, so it was just literally a case of being out in the boat and looking for spots that looked like they'd been fed on recently. There's loads of spots out there, kind of peppered everywhere. Some big ones, some little ones. But if you've ever sort of spent any time fishing from a boat, you can pretty quickly recognise what a spot that's been fed on looks like, as opposed to an old spot. You know, there was loads of spots where there was kind of the remains of old mussel shells and gravel and stuff like that. Clearly tell they've been fed on, but not that year. You know, there was still a little fine layer of kind of sediment and stuff over the top of the stones and that, and you can tell that's, you know, an area that's not been touched that year. But I found a couple of spots that had been freshly cleaned and freshly polished, and I was kind of...
And visually, what do those spots look like? Just there's just a bit more on them than just completely laid bare.
Yeah, sometimes it can just be a simple case of, like, you know, an area of gravel as big as this table, say, in between weed, you know, big towers of weed sort of all around the side of it, and all the gravel will be like a little bit darker, and you can see there's like a tiny bit of like algae and kind of, you know, filamentous sort of weed and stuff on top of it, bit of sediment and stuff, and then there'll just be a little area maybe in one corner that's just cleaner, just polished, you know, almost like someone's dusted it off with a duster, and it's just feeding activity from fish. But actually the spots that I caught from that were the most productive ones were the really clean silt, so just perfect, beautifully clean silt, like almost like this colour, just with tiny little white specks in the bottom, just with the odd little bits of polished stone that's been sucked in and out.
Do you think concealment, obviously when you're going out on a boat and stuff like that, you can be quite concealed as well? I mean, how important do you think that is when
it was? Normally I would say yes, and I think on like you know, the UK big carp waters, I think line lay and line concealment and all that sort of thing is like sometimes I think one of the main sort of deciding factors between catching and not catching. Is like if your line lay into a spot is immaculate, you've got a really good chance of a bite. If you're hung up over a bit of weed, you might as well have no chance. I remember when I fished the car park, there was a couple of spots on there that didn't do fish for a few years when I was on there, and I'm convinced it was just because of how the weed beds had changed and grown, and the line lay was just shit into the spots. So what was once a productive spot was just, the fish just knew when there was a rig on it because of the line lay. That particular lake, because it was, you know, you were literally fishing into holes half the size of this table and onto a little spot, but you had 8 or 10 foot of weed up out of it. So there was no way you could hide that you were putting a rig down there. All you could do was put it as close to the edge of the weed as possible, so that your leader was as close to the the weed as possible. But there's no way. I mean, we sort of affectionately call it lobster potting, because it's literally like you're lobster potting down into it, which is far from ideal, but sometimes needs must, and there's just no other way to.
And you don't think it made too much difference?
No, like I'd use my net pole and I'd try and push the main line down into it, but it always just ends up working its way back up over the course of the night or whatever.
And I guess it depends on direction the fish are coming into spots as well, doesn't it?
Yeah,
so
totally. Yeah, you don't want it at the back of the spot if you think the fish are going to be coming in from this direction. You want it obviously as close to the other side, so that they're just approaching it like that.
Why don't you think you've seen them from the boat? They were aware that you were out on the boat, do you think?
Yeah, they were just in tunnels in the weed, just kind of tucked up. And, but yeah, it was fascinating fishing. It was quite brutal because the weed was that heavy you couldn't use the outboard for a lot of it, so it was all rowing as well. Some of the spots were like 250, 300 yards away and stuff as well. So it was like trying to paddle through soup. I mean,
it's a nice picture.
There's one there in the net, and so when you've got one in the net as well, and you're paddling back from like 200 yards with one hand, like I've got little chicken arms as well. Like I'm not a big guy. I was literally ruined by the end of the week. Like, I had blisters on my hands. Like
I'm not surprised looking at that.
I was shredded. And I mean, we caught. I think I got about. I can't remember how many. I think maybe 9 or 10 bites in a couple of nights from there, which kind of, felt like I'd have been happy with one bite, to be honest, from a place like that. So to catch a few was great. Kind of all came together basically on the last night. That film's not out yet, so I won't say too much because it just leaves a nice little bit for the story, but had some absolute disasters. Yeah, like I say, I've smashed the van up, and then had an absolute mare one night getting my rods out. That was the last evening.
What do you mean you had a mare then? What happened?
I just had a complete disaster. So basically, I had 4 rods out, all at like, say, 250 to 300 yards, maybe roughly, something like that. And
sorry, were you braiding it?
Yeah, braid. Yeah. Just with like because obviously the last thing you want is the braid to sink into the weed, so you're just using like a floating braid basically. And because I'd only had bites on one of them, so the others had all been out for like 24 hours basically. We had to go and get COVID tests done to get back into the UK, but 72 hours before, so we had to make an appointment at a chemist, go and get to a chemist, get the like blah blah blah. And that day it was like 35-40 mile an hour winds. It was mega windy, and I'd realised basically there was no way that I was going to be able to wind in, because I had 10-ounce leads on.
10-ounce leads? Yeah,
you fishing at such long range in the weed and what have you. It's like, you need to know that your rig is going to stay on that spot. It's going to drop straight away as soon as you get a bite. But so I was like, I can't. There's so much weed out there. I was like, I can't wind in. I've got to use the boat basically to get it in. Basically, long story short, I had a bite about an hour before we were due for our tests. That cut all that time short because we filmed it. Literally had 10 minutes to like get into this village that I had no idea where it was, or to go and get this test done. So I basically just left Rich with the rods, left them out. I went and got my test done, came back, and then Rich went out and did his.
So what were the consequences of missing the test then?
Well, no, nothing really. Just that the rods had been out for 24 hours basically, and I over the course of that time with the massive wind, there was obviously the actual main weed. Your braid just pings through it actually really quite easy and cuts through it really quite easy as well. Wasn't a problem at all. But there was obviously a load of silkweed in there as well. And actually, funny enough, like Tom Stokes was talking about from his fishing on what's the lake called?
Wazing?
No. The one that he's just fished just recently. Yes. And he was talking about how much of a problem the silkweed was on there. Like, it looks quite benign, fluffy, soft,
and you got all those
silky green stuff, but actually it is just an utter nightmare. So basically, my plan was just to get in the boat with a fresh rig, fresh bait, wind myself out to my rig, switch the rig and bait, and re-drop. What I didn't foresee was obviously this silkweed. So I got like 30 yards out, and then if you probably know it, but like silkweed just wedges into these like solid balls of weed in your tip. And as soon as it does that, it does not come off. Like, you have to ship the rod back and you have to pick it off, and that takes, you might spend 30 seconds picking like one bit off. I had like 300 yards strung with silkweed that I just didn't realize. So obviously within like 2 minutes, because it was still a really big southwesterly, within 2 minutes I drifted and propped all the braid on my other rods. Like, long story short, it was just an utter disaster. Like, it's like suddenly, so like you're adrift, you've got rigs miles out in the lake, you've wound a shitload of braid into your prop. Like, it was just total disaster. I basically just got one rod back in properly before dark, and then caught a nice one the following morning. Not a massive one, just like mid upper 20 common, but I think sometimes catches like that can mean more than catching an easy big one. So, and
well, I mean, when you have to go through that, and you still having to go through some sort of
part of it.
Yeah.
But I was really frustrated at the time, and I'm mega particular about getting my rods out as well as I possibly can each night. Like, I'm ultra particular all the time. I just sort of always have been, really. You'll be casting a lot, will you? And just it has to be. Back here over in the UK, if I'm fishing small spots and accurate, like if it takes 30 casts, it takes 30 casts. If it takes 40 casts, it takes 40 casts.
That's never bothered you.
No, don't get me wrong. I'd much rather do it in 2 or 3. But if it takes 43, so be it. I'm not going to leave it until I'm 100% happy that it's right. And must admit, that was sort of the one thing, just to sort of digress, when I did all the tuition work, like that was the one overriding thing that I realised that most guys don't do, is they'll have a couple of casts and they'll be like, yeah, that'll be all right.
You've said that before, though, haven't you? So, I mean, you've been spending a period of time with them, and going over stuff with them, and then getting your rods out quite late, and they're surprised at how meticulous you actually are with getting your rods out.
Yeah.
And then seeing the result at the end of it as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, obviously, tuitions are always totally, or they were. I don't do them anymore. But when I did, obviously, it was always completely focused on them. My fishing was just, I'd just get my rods out once everything was completely done. Obviously, the lad would always be in the absolute best swim that we felt like, was the best option for the day, and I would just slot in, wherever was sensible.
But there's no compensation for actually
side.
Watching you fish, though, is there? I mean, it's like, seeing you fish and seeing how you do it.
Yeah, sometimes, because everything would usually take a bit longer, with the lads, and then sometimes we'd have dinner afterwards and that as well. So sometimes it might not finish till like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, something like that. And then I'd head off back to my swim to do my rods, but I'd be starting from scratch. My kit would often still just be in the van, and they'd be amazed that I was going to start afresh, like at 10:30 at night or whatever. But I always used to say to them, I feel like, because everything is done by feel fundamentally, I was used to say it doesn't make any difference whether it's light or dark or not. I've always said really that I'd be pretty confident to put my rods out with my eyes closed, because it's all feel. And that, I think that was one of the main things that you're always trying to teach people, was the the subtlety of sensation and feel with a fishing rod and a leading rod to find the right spots.
You're surprised at the amount of people that can't do that? They struggle with that still? Yeah,
definitely, because it's hard. It's a strange little skill to acquire.
I mean, it's hammered home though, isn't it?
It is, but like everything with carp fishing, like people they want the nice shiny fix or the new pot of hook baits or whatever. Like, that's going to turn their fishing around, not walking around in the middle of the night looking for fish, or really practicing casting and getting better at spot finding or whatever. I think people just by nature sort of want a quicker fix often, I think. But
well, I think they hope for that as well, like you say, because the type of things that you're trying to teach them there is it's inherently a little bit more skilled and difficult to learn.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, I think a lot of people massively overcomplicate carp fishing. Like the one thing that I always try to hammer home to people was that actually I think carp fishing is really, really simple. Like, find the carp, find a really good spot that they're happy to feed on near where you found them, put some good bait on it, a decent rig with a sharp hook, and you'll catch them. And like, it is no more complicated than that. I really don't believe it is. Like, everywhere I've fished over the 30 years or whatever it is that I've been carp fishing now, like, that holds true.
Yeah, I mean, that finding the carp bit, it's I mean, there are inherent skills there that are kind of quite, that some people are just better at that than others. But but being able to apply yourself to that sort of side of the fishing is really difficult for people.
I mean, and everyone wants something different from fishing as well. Some people, do just want to go and kick back and get away from the stresses of working week, family, and everything else. Put their rods out, and if they get a chance of a fish, then that's great. And I think that's definitely like the big end of the wedge. I think, the guys that are being like ultra meticulous and are putting 110% in, they're the tiny little thin end of the wedge, aren't they? I think,
But you said as well that, I mean, the average carp angler's aspirations, are a lot different to, people like yourself, that are right at the other end of the sphere.
I guess. I mean, I think fundamentally everyone just wants to enjoy it at the end of the day, don't they? I mean, I think success means different things to different people.
Do you sometimes look at those people that are kind of maybe a little bit naive and don't quite see the whole thing and just think, but they enjoy it just as much and just think, sometimes that would be a bit
I wish
easier.
I could switch my... Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Because like even on the tuitions, I would, if I wasn't putting my rods out till 11 o'clock, even though I'd caught most of the fish in some of the venues that we were fishing, I'd still be 100% putting my rods out. If it took me 20 casts to get the drop I wanted, I'd still do it, because I don't know, I just can't put my rods on my rests and go to sleep unless I know they're right. Doesn't matter how tired I am, doesn't matter what's happened during the day.
It's inbuilt, isn't it?
It's just inbuilt, and it's not that I'm a perfectionist, because I don't really believe in that. But it's just that I don't even really know where that's particularly come from, actually.
Being a perfectionist.
Yeah, no, I don't think it is. Like, because I think perfectionism is dangerous. In honesty,
you don't think you're a perfectionist?
No. I just think I like to do things as well as I can. I don't necessarily think that's perfectionism. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know, difficult thing. But yeah, I just
it's hard to leave things, isn't it, that you don't think are quite right. I think for some people it's and I can think of loads of times where shit's gone horribly wrong, and a lot of people would have just hung the rigs in the butt rings and just gone to sleep and just gone, fuck that, I'm going to bed. But I just don't seem to be able to do that. I'll just I'll put them back out, and I'll put them back out as well as I can. And a couple of the times, like over the years, I've caught a big un after something like that's happened, and I've just been like, no way, like as if that's happened. Like after that, I could so nearly just went back to bed. So nearly just went back to bed. But that's what you do it for, isn't it? It's just that because of that, that potential prize. If you just give it one more try, you've got to keep pushing it.
Yeah, I guess. Like I'm pretty sort of, I think I'm pretty laid back really as a person, and with what I do. But I just can't fish unless I'm doing it at 100%. Which is why the big fish thing just got to the point where it was just really frustrating me, because like I knew what I needed to do. I've done enough. I mean, I wouldn't even class myself as a big fish angler. I've caught a couple of big fish and targets and stuff over the years, but I wouldn't say enough to classify myself as a big fish angler. Not at all. But I've done enough, and I've been around the scene long enough, and I'm friends with enough guys that do that week in, week out to know what certain waters demand, and what you realistically need to be doing on any sort of given lake to stand a chance of catching one or two, and whereas, so these days I'll look at a lake and I'll think, is that somewhere where I feel like I could manage with the time and resources and stuff that I've got available? Whereas for a long time, I wasn't really looking at it like that. I was just like, I want to catch that one, or I want to go and fish there. I want to go, and I'd be trying to, I was trying to do work nights on Rockford, trying to get 3 rods out at like 170, and put a bucket of bait out. It's all casting obviously on Rockford as well, isn't it? So like it's like 2, 3, 4 hours to get your rods out or whatever. It's a total drama because of the range and all that, and then winding them in the morning before bite time, because bite times on there are generally during the day and later in the morning. So it was I was completely stupid. You're just setting yourself up for. Yeah,
well, you've mentioned as well about stress and anxiety. It's something that you struggle with. You think that this type of fishing can really contribute to that?
It did. Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because obviously you're actively and knowingly putting yourself in that position. So you certainly can't complain about any sort of anything that's kind of that's happening to you because of that, because it's a personal choice, isn't it, to go and fish whatever venue. But I think certainly when my teaching commitments had sort of reached a peak, and I was still keeping sub running in the in the background and stuff as well, still doing all the social media every week in, week out, and everything else, because I still, even though I only did the 3 journals back in 2014, 13, 14 and 15, had a bit of a hiatus from the print, but I was still selling the clothing and doing all that in the meantime. Me and Sarah used to post all the orders out ourselves, so you've got orders coming in, that perhaps actually I can only do the Friday night, but I've got to be home before the post office shuts at 1 o'clock, and I've got to get home and I've got to pack 25 orders before then or whatever. See, it was always sometimes I think the nature of some of that fishing, especially on the really busy places, it wasn't nice, relaxing fishing. I just felt sometimes like it was just adding to the stresses. All I'd be doing was driving to the lake, kind of worrying about how busy it was going to be, if the spot
things that are out of your control.
Yeah, which is just it's just like silly, really. And again, it kind of comes, but we were chatting about it before, but I've always been quite unrealistic, I think, often with things that I want to do. I've always had sort of, high expectations, for myself and
and we said it's sort of reoccurring as well with that, because you put yourself through that, and we said you it's like someone that's achieved something really great, isn't it? They achieve it and you think, great, you can sit back and enjoy that, but then it's just a reset and it all starts all over again.
Yeah, of course, because past achievements are all well and good, but they're not. That's not the here and now. And we chatted about it when I first spoke to you the other day about sort of I think that my shift over the recent years has been to, I found I was always like projecting into the future or thinking back to stuff, particularly with the sort of campaign fishing. Often I'd be thinking, trying to set stuff up for the future, either through baiting spots, I'll bait this for 3 or 4 weeks and that'll be prime for that next new moon phase. Or hoping the weather's going to change for the following day, or hoping there's not going to be no one in that spot by the time you get there and stuff like that. So I found I was like always kind of thinking and kind of like, just sort of worrying about what was going to happen. And it's a stressful type of fishing to do, definitely. Funny enough, I spoke to Oz Holness on the phone this week about it, and he was saying that this year he's just kind of kicked back a little bit and fished a load of different venues, and how thoroughly enjoyable it had been, and how nice it was to like not be so driven for a single target, because he was like, and we just had a chuckle about it, and he was like, it's not always a nice place to be. And you when you're so driven,
you find with that European fishing as well. I mean, you find that then those hassles
all dissolves.
Gone.
Like, absolutely everything just drifts away. You turn up at a venue and it's busy. You just go, oh, fuck it, we'll go somewhere else. Let's go to the other barrage that's 20 minutes down the road. Let's go and have a look at this place or whatever. Or it's like 2,000 acres, so you just go somewhere else. Or, like all those expectations and all that sort of side of it just drifts away, and it becomes much more about the experience of the trip itself as opposed to driving towards an end game. I think. And
it's being in the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, it is much more about the moment, and I think, again, we spoke about it briefly, but I've always done a lot of surfing and riding, and I've always found it much easier to be like in the moment and there, and I don't know, perhaps it's because of the nature of work that I've done, and perhaps it's because I've spent so much time involved in carp fishing. Maybe I just enjoy them so much because it's a break from the fishing, perhaps. I don't know, I'm not sure, but when you go surfing, you're out in the water for 3 hours or something like that. You don't really think about anything.
Yeah, and like you say, it's not about catching a certain size wave and then thinking,
no.
Right.
I mean, you're always you're always watching the ocean because it's dangerous and you have to. So you're always very aware of what's going on. You're always very aware of anybody else in the water. You're aware of like the tides and sort of stuff like that. It can be a dangerous place to be, but you're aware in a different way. It's all on a slightly subconscious level, which is like the whole flow state sort of level, isn't it? And same when you're riding, your brain switches to a completely different mode. You're not being thoughtful and analytical. You're responding on a completely sort of different basis.
Are you in that state very often?
No, not enough, but it's an incredibly good state of mind for humans to be in. There's been a bit of research done recently. I've read a few books and stuff about it, and it's a really, really powerful place.
You tried meditation or anything like that?
Yeah. So I used to meditate with a monk called Tompa, actually, when I lived down in Cornwall. I did that for a good few years. That was like traditional Buddhism. And then, funny enough, the school that I taught at, we were one of the first schools in the country to bring in mindfulness meditation into an education. Oh,
that's amazing!
My friend Jem, he worked with Oxford University, and he spearheaded the whole thing.
Is that the CBT stress reduction meditation that they do there?
I think it might be a different strand to that. I'm not sure, to be honest. But it's a real buzzword now, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You see it everywhere. Like, you can't log on to Instagram without seeing some kind of like Calm app or whatever on your phone as well these days, can you? Which is quite funny because you're seeing it on social media. But he was doing that. It must have been, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years ago now, and So we used to have a couple of classes where, because he basically taught us as well, so that we could then teach it to the students. So
how regularly were you doing it?
There's been spells when I've done it every day.
Yeah. Do you feel you need to do it every day, really?
Yeah, I know that I should, but
it's hard work, isn't it?
It is. It's meditation is very, very difficult. Actually,
how long do you meditate for at a time then?
So at anywhere from like a sort of 3-minute reset to sort of a 25-minute sitting or something like that, or sometimes longer. Like a 40-minute.
That's a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's hard. I did a couple of retreats when I was in Cornwall.
Oh, did you?
4 weekend retreats. Yeah, where we did some really long. It's incredible because it shows you how your mind works.
How long do you find before you start feeling the benefits from that as well? Do you?
To be honest, there's probably only really been a couple of spells when I've been disciplined enough to make it work properly. In honesty, I get my sort of anxiety and stress relief from physical stuff, which is why I run and ride and surf and stuff like that. That's what.
It's another form of meditation.
It is,
anyway,
and I try and meditate of a form when I run, just sort of rather than using it as an hour or whatever to think. I try and just
switch off,
focus on the sensation of the running itself, and
be present.
Yeah. And I mean it's funny because it's a bit of a sort of it is a bit of a buzzword, isn't it? And almost become a bit of a cliche, I think, in sort of some ways. I think in sort of Western culture currently, but it's been a massive part of Eastern philosophy forever, hasn't it?
Oh, they completely live by it.
Yeah, and it's I think it's like how you bring it into your life, I think is I think for the average Westerner, I think meditation's pretty difficult, and I think people get it in different ways. Like I say, I think for me the most effective way I get it is definitely through surfing and riding and running. You get the physical buzz and everything, but you also get that time away from thinking about stuff as well.
I've noticed it through yoga and and doing meditation as well, but it's great that the schools are doing that now as well. I didn't realize that they were a lot of schools doing that. I'm not sure how. I mean, I've been out of teaching sort of 3 years now, so I'm not sure how far it's got rolled out, but I think I think it's been pretty successful. Students were a bit like, what is this? They go for it though, do they?
No, I think they're just really confused because it's so contradictory to how everyone works these days. When we were talking about Instagram before and how quick you scroll through your social media feeds and stuff these days, the thought of slowing down consciously and emptying your head of that stuff is so contradictory to pretty much everything. Modern life is mental.
Yeah, it's encouraged to be energetic and fast-paced all the time.
And if you're slowing down, and if you're it's almost looked on as a,
laziness.
Yeah. But I think there's, long term, it's all heavy stuff. Probably you don't want to talk about it now, but I think long term, I think social media and everyone's consumption of how, don't get me wrong, I am absolutely as addicted to it as everybody else. I spend way too long on Instagram and everything else. I'm not saying I'm any different, because I'm not. It's incredibly addictive and I spend way too long on it. But I think long term, I think it's definitely really bad.
Do you feel that you need to live up to expectations with what you do and all that Instagram stuff? Yeah,
to a point.
Adds a little bit more stress to things, a little bit maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's impossible really not to. I try not to worry about it. I try to just put up what I think is nice, and you try and write an interesting caption. Put something out there that's a little bit different or whatever, or or with just share the best stuff that I can. But there's always a bit of a feeling like, oh, you're living up to expectations and stuff like that. But again, I sort of. Again, you can't worry about that, there's no point me looking around and thinking, oh shit, look how many big uns Tom's caught this year, or look how many big uns Daryl's caught, that's never going to lead to anything other than you feeling kind of unhappy about what you've caught. There's no point comparing yourself, is there? And I think that's the one dangerous thing with social media is like, you sit there and you scroll through like 500 big beautiful fish, but you're sat in work, aren't you?
I think you said as well, wasn't it? 90% of people have got to go to work and do proper jobs, and those people that you see, they're in a different, they live a different reality, don't they?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. And I think it's frustrating sometimes, just seeing endless parades of big uns. I know, and so yeah, it's. But
do you get quite good press on social media generally?
Yeah, I mean, touch wood, I've like suffered very little in the way of sort of negativity or sort of anything like that, the like trolling or whatever. Like,
you just try and stay away from controversy. I guess that's the best way to do that.
I don't know. I just put out. I mean, in terms of what I run on my feed, it's literally just it's what I'm catching. It's where I've been, and the captions and stuff are just kind of related to that. So it's pretty sort of inoffensive sort of stuff, really. I don't go anywhere near Facebook. I think like Facebook is like orientated towards negativity, I swear. And Twitter as well. I couldn't get with Twitter. Not because I was receiving anything bad, but it just kind of seemed like it was just people wanting to rant about stuff and be involved in like arguments of a form. And I just couldn't get with I just wasn't interested in that format of like sharing stuff.
So the Instagram stuff for you, is it about feeling like you need to keep up with it, or just doing it purely intrinsically for yourself?
I mean, it's a bit of both. I mean, partly because I've got like hundreds of beautiful shots from Sub and all the contributors and guys involved with that I really, really want to share. A bit like Tom was talking about with the Korda mindset. Insta, they had all this wealth of amazing shots from all these guys, but sort of didn't really have an adequate platform to share it on, and I think Mindset's perfect for that because it's a beautiful place to share loads of great shots that, the little incidental shots that capture more of the atmosphere perhaps than some of the mainstream stuff on the main feed or whatever. So part of me wants to share that stuff because I love sharing good imagery, and obviously, again, going back to the photography teaching days and stuff, you're doing that because you believe in it as a medium and as a form of communication, and you want to share that, like you want to show people stuff that you think is amazing. So that's the bottom line, really. And with art and stuff like that, if you can't share it, it just feels like, what's the point? It's dead. What's the point? The circle's not closed, is it?
Yeah.
If you make something and keep it to yourself, like, all right, yeah, you've had a nice experience doing it, but that's quite a selfish sort of pointless thing to do. That's the wrong way to describe it, but yeah. So and then my own personal one, I don't post on it quite as regularly. Like Sub is every day. I'm like really, really diligent about that now because I'm, trying to run it as like a proper business that hopefully in sort of 4 or 5 years time can support me properly.
I didn't realise when you said to me you're putting 50 hours a week into Sub.
I reckon at least, yeah, if not more. But I mean, I've probably put, even when I was teaching, I was still putting really significant hours into it. When you started that, because we're looking at a picture up here now. I mean, it isn't just the magazine now. You've created a whole, it's a full brand.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got to be happy with the way it's turned out.
Yeah, massively so. And I'm always really, really humbled by, the guys involved, the guys that contribute, and kind of just the project as a whole, really. I'm definitely really, really proud of it. Definitely.
I mean, there's some high standards of photography to be able to qualify for getting in that book. I mean, is there when's Sub 5 coming out? Is there any plans for that? Or?
Next Christmas. Yeah, that will be, but it will be a completely different format to this one, and it'll be something.
So you need to find
something fresh and new again.
Some good photographers and some good pictures. Is that a problem?
So many out. No, and that was, to be honest, that was one of the main reasons that I started wanting to put these together, because it seemed to me that there was a fairly small circle of people that were getting put in the magazines, and I was like, there's so many incredible guys out there catching really great fish that I'm sure would write amazing stories, that've got interesting things to say, that are catching a couple of big uns a year but are working 5 days a week and have got 2 kids and a mega stressful job, and those 2 big uns are like unbelievably hard won carp. They haven't got 5 days a week to play with. Like that's what I find really inspiring, and so kind of I just wanted Sub really to be a different platform to kind of showcase some of that stuff really, and just sort of offer a platform really to put it out there, and just to dig a little bit deeper into some of those stories. I mean, I think kind of really the podcast format now in a way does like the long form interview that talks about all that other stuff that kind of wasn't being done before. Back when I started it in like the early sort of like 2011, I started putting it together. There wasn't really any of that sort of stuff out there. Like no one was doing it. No one was interested in alternative photography. No one was even really interested in beautiful scenics and stuff like that. There was no real sort of platform for it. People were writing books. Obviously they've always been done, but kind of single author thing, and it was a very established format and what have you. I mean,
it was received well quickly as well, wasn't it? I mean, the first one came out and it was...
I just think because it was just something a little bit different.
Do you feel as well that you kind of got into that still at the point where publications were doing well, and they've kind of, although they've dwindled away a little bit, your kind of little team has sort of stayed with you now?
Stayed true to print.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I guess so. I mean, I think, yeah.
With this, do you look at it as like, like a diary? I mean, it's an ongoing diary that keeps going on.
And it's, like everything, in life and how I feel about stuff as well, it's continually changing and shifting and stuff as well. And some of the material reflects that in certain ways and so on and so forth. And I think, the lovely thing about it is because kind of doesn't have to be stuck to any sort of rigid fixed format. I can do whatever I want with it, which is great. And, hopefully that keeps it fresh and interesting for people as well. Because fundamentally, my main concern really is, what are people going to get from it? Are people going to enjoy it? Really, that's what I want to, that's what I want to do, and so hopefully the reader's experience is as good as possible. But
I think it's nice
switching things up is kind of a nice way to keep people guessing and give someone something fresh, isn't it?
And you feel like changing the whole format of the book itself is a different is a hardback as opposed to a paperback before. You feel like changing that all the time just gets people.
So, I mean, part of the reason for that was, I mean, if you think about a normal traditional Carp book, it's considerably smaller, isn't it? Part of the kind of drive for doing the number 4 this sort of size was that we all look at pictures this big now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tiny, like a couple of inches by a couple of inches. Like, it's tiny. You can't get any real true sense of texture or detail, out of images through a phone, really. And by nature, because it's on a phone, you look at stuff incredibly quickly. The idea with this being a slightly larger format, a bit like the kind of large format photography books that you get, it's just that they're lavish. The images are big. You can really sort of sink into them and spend a bit of time, more than a second and a half like you do on Insta, looking at stuff. And and also, the beautiful thing about Sub as well is I can cherry pick from all the best guys out there. There's like the best guys from Korda in there. There's the best guys from Nash. There was the best guys from Sticky and Thinking. And so kind of
are people quite honoured to be asked to do stuff for that book?
Yeah, which always kind of I'm always really humbled by, I think, because I don't see myself as any sort of like, I don't know, like taste maker or sort of anything like that.
You don't see yourself as a bit of an influencer?
No, I know, I hate that idea. I just see stuff that I like and think, fuck, that's really cool. Right. I'd like to show that to other people. And that's just
I mean, it's had an influence on carp fishing, hasn't it? You've seen, obviously like mindset and stuff like that. I mean, it's kind of
interesting
originated.
to hear. Tom and Dan actually both talk about it, and that's it's absolutely lovely to hear, definitely. And like I say, you know, I just think of myself, really, I'm just pulling it all together. You know, really, it's like, you know, the likes of Kev Wyatt's work and Ollie Davies's work and, you know, everyone else that's in there that really makes it what it is. Really, I'm just the one that can be bothered to bring it all together. Everyone else is like, print's just too hard to do these days.
Yeah.
Fuck that.
Yeah.
Like, but I just still, I still really believe in it. And I think, you know, whilst the old magazine model has collapsed, you know, the old kind of where you had 10, 12 people working, everyone's getting paid 20, 30 grand or whatever. And it was like, you know, I mean, that model of magazine clearly just doesn't work anymore. But throughout lots of different sort of pursuits, the little kind of niche indie mags that are like one-man bands, passion project sort of things are still really strong. And there's loads of them in other worlds, surf, skate, riding, you know, they're really strong. And some of those, like surfing's probably got 4 or 5 one-man bands, like sub sort of styled things going on, all with a slightly different slant, different aesthetic, different take, different content and stuff. And you know, yeah, I still think there's definitely room for it. And
did you say you got plans?
Enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean that's the main
thing. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Did you say you got plans for bringing out, you know, something that's you know, a little bit different? You know, what was it, like a monthly or a?
So no,
not monthly.
Don't want to go down the monthly road. Just like deadlines, but I mean, fair play to anyone that's worked on a monthly over the years. Like, I dread to think.
Monthly sounds crazy.
Deadlines to get stuff out, especially these days where everything needs digital promotion and all that side of things as well. You know, it wasn't just you put it together and then it went to Smith's or whatever, like it used to be 15 years ago or whatever. Now it's like all everything that comes with it as well, isn't it? So no, the plan is to do a twice annual magazine. So yeah, it's already in the pipeline. Concept work on the aesthetic and the graphics and all that is done and sort of pinned down. All the content is pinned down, I think, bar sort of one piece. I won't say too much about the concept or the themes because it's too easy just to put something out quick. So yeah, to keep a little bit of that close to my chest. But the hope originally was to get it out before Christmas. But one thing and another, basically, just that's not quite going to happen. So it'll be early next year. So the plan's to do a spring and an autumn, 2 classic times in a carp angler's calendar. So yeah, do a spring and an autumn. So it'll be 140 pages, collectible, nice paper, little bit of advertising in there, which will make it completely different from these because these have always been sort of completely, you know, ad free. But to make a format like that happen, you know, really, you do need a bit of advertising in there to help fund it. So it's going to have a small amount of advertising, and yeah, just sort of really like nice, accessible content.
I mean, like I say, there might be a niche there now because everything else has sort of disappeared. And
yeah, definitely. I think there will be. And you know, my hope is that, because I think sometimes sub's been looked at as kind of, oh, it's a bit too highbrow for me, maybe.
Right.
I think some guys look at it like that, even though I've always wanted it to be sort of something that absolutely anyone could aspire to and take something from. I think sometimes there's been a little bit of that sort of thought about it. So yeah, the plan for the mag as well is to make it like 100% accessible to anyone, like you know, whether they started carp fishing last week or they've been doing it 35 years, which is quite a tricky sort of balance, but I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure it's possible. So yeah, really excited.
So catching heather then, I think you might have said that it hasn't meant as much to you as what some people might have imagined, Gaz.
It's a funny one, isn't it? I mean, at the time it truly did, like, it meant absolutely everything. You know, I dreamt of catching some of those carp since being a kid, since, you know, seeing the early stuff in Big Carp, and then obviously going back to In Pursuit and stuff again. And yeah,
There's the picture there.
Yeah, I mean, it's so strange, you know, like looking back at it now.
So the picture is actually, you've just landed it because it weeded you up, didn't it?
It did, yeah. It was an incredibly tense battle, and to be honest, like looking back now, it was exactly the kind of battle that could so easily have gone the other way. Like, she was locked absolutely solid. Had to handline just for a point, just to get her move in. And yeah, really, it was a battle that should have probably fallen the other way. Looking back now, but yeah, thankfully kind of fate fell my way. And yeah, so it kind of, do you know what? It almost feels like it was another lifetime ago that now. It almost doesn't feel like it's me looking back at the shots now. Strange, really.
So what did catching a fish like that? What was the euphoria like at the time? I mean, was that?
Yeah,
that was your whole world at that point.
Yeah, it's huge buzz. But I think I've always found I don't know if it's just me or not, but I find the buzz from them sort of captures subsides like pretty quick.
How quickly?
Oh, it's hard to say, isn't it?
So is it literally like you catch that and then it's like, were you on to the next one after that? Where did you go after that?
No, I stayed on for the rest of that year.
Yes,
I caught pearly tail. It was only a few weeks after, I think, actually. I caught heather and pearly that year, and then went back the following year and caught the baby orange and lost what I think was the big orange, which was sort of my last bite from there.
So you were on the Carp Lake as much as anything to enjoy the stock that was in there. And
yeah,
not just
I wanted to catch all 6 of those mirrors, because they sort of it was around about a time. Like, I never really thought I'd get to fish the car park because a lot of that old history, sadly, they passed away really by that point. Basil died while I was at university in the early 2000s, and then car park lost a couple. Single scale and chunky and uglo, and a lot of the other big uns were starting to pass away as well. And I think during those sort of few years of carp fishing, I mean, there's so many big fish around now. There's so many big uns around. It's phenomenal. Back then, I think in the early 2000s, there really, really wasn't. You had like the old set of big uns, fish like Mary, two-tone, the Black Mirror, really all the big uns that were in here, and sort of a couple of the other books, I suppose, at the time. But after that, like it didn't really feel like there was much coming through because they were all old groups of like older strain carp. And so I think stocking and stuff that was happening, I don't know, any sort of seemed like day tickets and stuff were getting new stock, and I don't know, it just kind of...
Do you feel like it was your sort of destiny to fish that lake, though? After being so influenced by that book, it's somewhere that you thought you'd end up fishing.
Yeah, I mean, it was somewhere that I always really hoped that I'd get the chance to fish, but just didn't really think that life was ever going to sort of go that way. In honesty, when I moved to Cornwall, I thought that was it for carp fishing. So 2001, when I moved to Falmouth, really, for me, that was it. That was sort of carp fishing done. I just assumed that I'd live in Cornwall for the rest of my life, and that was...
Find somewhere down
there.
That
was that. Yeah. Well, no, not even that, really. I just imagined that I'd just
completely not
surf for the rest of my days, and that would be that. But
you would have been happy to have done that then?
Well, obviously not.
Yeah.
Obviously not, given that I'm sat here now. I think that's the thing. Carp fishing's always pulled me back. Like, there's clearly something about it that's like deeply... ingrained, and something that just keeps pulling me back, because it was only I think it was my second year of uni. First year was just wild as it is, drunken haze, and second year I remember I'd passed my driving test, gone back with the car, and I took In Pursuit with me. I didn't take any rods or anything like that, but I took In Pursuit with me. And second year I'd moved into a house where I was living. I wasn't in halls. Obviously, halls of residence isn't the ideal spot for a load of carp kit and all the rest, is it? And took that back with me, and literally within I don't know, I'm sure it was like a couple of months or whatever, I'd gone back and got my kit and brought my kit back down. I remember my housemates being like, "What's all this?" And I was like, "It's my carp fishing kit." And they were like, "You're what?" Putting it next to the surfboards, the sort of. So and I was quite lucky really, because in Falmouth there's a really big reservoir just near Falmouth, like 5 minutes.
Not College
drive. Yeah. It's the upper reservoir from College, so Argyle Reservoir.
Right.
There was some lovely carp in there, really old strain ones. And so I fished there for a couple of years. And what was quite nice was that the surfing and the fishing never really sort of clashed too much, because classically good surf conditions aren't good fishing conditions, and vice versa. Like big, low pressures, southwesterlies, like all that sort of thing is really poor surfing conditions in Cornwall. High pressure, easterlies, northerlies, northeasterlies, or whatever. Usually it's good surfing conditions. So yeah, I could sort of do a bit of both.
So it always keeps coming back then, doesn't it?
Yeah, so that's the thing. And like I say, like I remember hearing about Basil dying when I was down at uni and just thinking, oh man, that's
I was working for my dad at the time, and when I told them all at work that Basil died, I went out for lunch, and when I came back, they all had black armbands on.
The thing,
I mean, it's a big thing at the time, wasn't it? Because like you say, there was a group of fish.
People invested huge swathes of their lives in trying to catch those carp, and if they did, amazing. The lads that were still there fishing, for some of them when they passed away, they might have invested like every weekend of their life for like 4, 5, 6, 7 years. I remember I've told the story before, but I was there when John Pack caught heather. He didn't shout heather, he shouted freedom. Because that was it. He could leave. Don't get me wrong, it was a beautiful place to be, and like lots of my best friends to this day I met during those years. So kind of in a way, looking back now, I actually think the best thing about them times was the lads that I met during those years, definitely. And I think there was kind of like a shared, even though everyone was fishing for the same set of fish, there was no kind of jealousy or animosity or...
But do you think, I mean, to shout out freedom, I mean, do you think that's a common trend with, a lot of carp anglers, that really they just want to get off of somewhere and take a big sigh and think, thank God for that, rather than
maybe. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs if that actually is the case, isn't it? I mean, when I left, when I stopped fishing there personally, I just had enough. I was just bored of, like, because I was fishing for Arthur. And that one it's only got history of getting caught from a couple of sort of areas, really. So I was just going there week in, week out, putting my rods out in the same old spots and just hoping it'd turn up. You didn't see it very often, that one. There was very little to go on usually, so you couldn't really do anything more than just go down and put your rods out in the same spots.
Is that what you always do, I guess, on a lake like that? Because you would see the fish so often in there as well.
Yeah.
You knew it.
Certain ones were really easy to target. I started off fishing the open water because you had a chance of any of them. And then as soon as I caught Dustbin and Heather fishing the open water, I was like, sweet, I'm going to concentrate on the margin fishing now. So I fished in the edge, fished in the gate, swim, caught pearly tail really quickly. I was the last person to ever catch pearly tail, actually. Caught her pretty quick, really within a few weeks of sort of targeting that little spot. And then, same the following year with the baby orange as well. Caught her from the same spot, sort of doing the same sort of thing. And so it was good, really, because you didn't just have to sit it out hoping that the right one turned up, if you know what I mean. You could specifically target certain
unusual
ones.
That as well, isn't it?
So unusual. And certain carp, when you looked at the history of where certain ones have been caught from, some of them had virtually zero history of ever getting caught from certain swims. Or like Heather, in the time I was there, I'm sure Heather hadn't been caught from the bars swim where Terry caught her from for like 10 years. So if you wanted to catch Heather, there was no point fishing the bars.
Why do you think that is then? Have you got any idea why?
I don't know. They knew they were so pressured. They knew exactly what was going on and what angler pressure was and what lines were and everything. And once or twice a year, they would just drop their guard enough to get caught, but the rest of the time they just knew exactly what was going on.
But it just goes to I mean, they're creatures of routine, aren't they? And
but formed by angler pressure. Yeah. And so in the end, I just got bored of sitting out in the same corner waiting for.
But your Yateley experience was probably a lot different to quite a few people. I mean, did you say you done a total of 20 odd nights in the end? Yeah,
no. So I think the first year, I think I did somewhere around about 24, maybe 26 nights. First year, I did. Yeah, sort of six nights initially. Caught the Dustbin, I think, on either my 5th or 6th morning, I think it was, and then caught a common the following morning, and then I didn't go back for a good sort of 6 or 8 weeks, I think. Everyone, there she is.
We're looking at the Dustbin.
such a cool carp.
That was the first.
That was my first bite. Yeah. and that was a truly genuine kind of like, my knees were jelly, and I've never ever before or since, to be honest, wanted a carp in my net so badly, because I'd seen it was her, and like it rocked as well, or rather him, and
did you say it was quite a wet night or something?
It was pouring down. Like, I'd always imagined that classic Yateley photo shoot that you used to see in big carp and stuff. 2 or 3 on hooking mats, 5 or 6 lads on cameras, a couple of goalies either side helping and all that. Like, there was none of that. There was my mate Barry, a camera that was steaming up really badly, and we kept getting water over the lens, and he was like, mate, these look shit. He was like looking at the back, and he's like,
I think it's a good night shot, actually. I don't think it's too bad.
It's not too bad. The first like 10 were completely unusable. The internal lens had steamed completely, and they just literally looked like they'd been shot like through a barbecue. It was completely misted, and he was like, mate, these look awful. So we actually had to put her back in the net for 5 minutes, and I had to try and sort the lens out, and so it was all just a drama. But at the end of the day, it's not the photos that really matter, is it? It's the capture and the memory. But
it is, but like you say, when you look back to it, you know, that period, and you know, Heather and all of that wouldn't be your number one memory necessarily, or
it's hard. I don't know, like, I never want to be that guy just sitting there looking back at my memories and being like, oh, remember when, you know, like, but not out there doing something that means just as much now. Like, I never want to. Fundamentally, I don't know. I think, you know, going back to the kind of mindfulness sort of thing and living in the moment, I think, you know, in some ways the only thing that really matters is what's happening right now, you know. And I think, I never want to be that guy sitting there.
Spend too much time thinking about
the past.
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong, I'm eternally glad that I went and did it and invested that time and, you know, made those friends, and you know, it worked out as it did.
Or waiting for something else to happen as well. You know, that's just as frustrating as well, isn't it? When you're, you know, when am I going to my chance? You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny looking back on stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where would you get your sort of, so ultimately now in hindsight, having done like, you know, European fishing and you know, this campaign stuff, where would you say that your true enjoyment of fishing comes from?
Do you know what? I honestly don't know anymore. Just kind of, I mean, for a little while, when I went on the first couple of the real big European trips, really that first one was Samir that we filmed. We did like 14 nights, fished 3 different venues. We went sort of right down to the south of France. And then we went to Salagou, and then we ended up in the Pyrenees. And like, I was just blown away, like just utterly blown away by the fish themselves.
We're looking at
the scenery.
There,
I mean, look at it.
It's
just phenomenal. It looks like the moon.
It looks like Mars.
Yeah, it's just.
Was it like iron there? Isn't it? Is that what it is?
It must just be really iron rich.
Yeah,
yeah.
And every time I see Salagou as well, it always looks quite moody weather-wise as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the summer it can be quite a beautiful place to be. We were there in November, and it was rough, and it was.
Was it?
Yeah, it was harsh. Like. Samir got the van stuck, didn't he? And we ended up getting pissed with this French local in the back of his van that night. Like, that night was a write-off, and we just started fishing the following day. I think we only did 2 nights in the end, and then sort of headed off. But yeah, I just think, them kind of places, they're so beautiful anyway, just kind of aesthetically. You know, the landscapes themselves are so beautiful. The idea of catching a carp from somewhere like that I just find fascinating. And also, I did sort of, you know, even though I grew up on, you know, stuff like In Pursuit, I also grew up on Hutchie's writing as well, you know. And you know, he was always writing about the likes of Cassian and places like that, and you know, I was always fascinated by that, even from being a kid. So it's something I'd always wanted to do, but I think because there's quite a big investment required to do that sort of fishing, just in terms of money, you know. I think had had I not stopped teaching and started investing more time in fishing, I'm not really sure I would have necessarily been able to justify spending the amount that I did on sort of kit and trying to invest time in those sort of bigger trips.
Do you think though those big trips as well, that they're better off being the reason why they are so special is because they're not
every day.
Yeah, they're not every day, are they?
Yeah, I think potentially. But I just think also it's just the diversity of the experience. You know, that first trip with Samir, the 3 places we fished were all vastly different. You know, they felt different, they looked different, the topography was different. You know, the carp were different, and it sort of kind of takes me back to what it was like being a kid. You know, when you go fishing, like everything's new, you turn up wide-eyed and just kind of in awe of everything, don't you? And I think those landscapes, partly maybe because of the scale of them, but also just because they're new and they're unfamiliar and they're strange and they're a bit wild. Sometimes, like Salagoo, they're just, you look at it and you're like, where do you start? You know, where do you start to try and catch a carp?
Yeah, it's all about trying
really
to keep
daunting.
Daunting. But when it's fresh and new, and it's just that's what really gets it, isn't it? That's when you're younger and you don't know what you're stepping into. It's the unknown, and it's actually it's the struggle as well, and you know, it's what you've got to overcome as well. You know, it's the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's funny really, because I think a lot of the European fishing has kind of never had the kudos that the big fish fishing in the UK has. You know, there's
looking at some of those pictures in that book, those Belgium carp.
They're phenomenal. But there's plenty of waters in Belgium where, you know, some of those carp have only done a handful of captures in their lifetime. They've done like less captures than the Burfield Common, and they might not have been caught for 5 or 6 or 7 years. Like they're every bit as worthy as any of those kind of in inverted, you know, proper big UK ones. So I think kind of, since being exposed to sort of a lot more of that and, you know, seeing sort of some of that side of it as well, kind of think that's just sort of opened my eyes a little bit as well. But I don't know, like, I think I've just got a slightly different value system with my fishing these days. I just like, my bottom line is enjoyment, like, and that's that. Like if I'm enjoying it, carry on. If I stop enjoying it, I'm just going to stop. Like, I'm not going to stay there and grind it out until the end, because
no, I mean, like you say, it's knowing when, isn't it? It's knowing when to do those sort of things.
But I think 10 years ago I probably wouldn't have admitted that. I don't think. Whereas now I'm okay with that.
And you said like your photo album now. Then, like I say, it's not that important to you, even though. But it's surprising because somebody like yourself that's quite artistic, and you like, it looks like you're the sort of person that likes reflection as well, which.
Yeah, no, I do. Don't get me wrong. But I think, I don't know. I'm just always looking for, you know, for fresh, like I say, for fresh new experiences, you know. I never want to be that guy just sitting back thinking, oh, remember them days when I used to do loads of fishing and catch nice carp.
Did you say that being the sort of person that puts 100% into everything can be to your detriment at times? I think it's, like I say, I think it's good because you generally, I think in some ways with the fishing, I think probably that has come about because of the time frames that I've had to fish in. You know, if you've only got one night a week, you're going to do everything you can to make sure that your rods are absolutely cock on for that one night, because there is no tomorrow and I can't come back the day after and I'm working, and you know, that's that. So I think a bit of that has come from that, actually. You know, and it's a bit like when we've been on, you know, on the bigger trips and stuff as well, and like when we were out at Salagoo, you know, we were only there for 2 nights, so we did everything we could to try and get on fish and make sure the rods were 100%, because we knew we were only going to be there a couple of nights. What does that sort of preparation look like then before going out on those sort of trips for you?
It's a good couple of days prep, really. You know, 6. I've got 6 leisure batteries that I take. Really need to get hold of like one of the big lithium power packs, like, or 2 or whatever, because they're like the old, like, you know, lead acid leisures are just a nightmare. They weigh a ton. Like, carting them 200-400 yards or whatever down to lakes is just no fun at all, and they take ages to charge and whatever. So yeah, kind of the charging side of things, making sure that just like everything's re-spooled, that you've got brimful, braid spools, spare spools, spare everything, because you're marooned often when you get there. So I've been a little bit, the last few trips I've been on, I suppose, a little bit more diligent probably, and a bit more careful maybe than I was on some of the other ones. We were laughing before about when we turned up, me and Marcus, to film on that reservoir, and my motor was broke. If I'd checked that before we'd left home, I'd have known that the bushes were shot on it, and I'd have sorted a new motor before I left. But instead, we were only there we were there to try and film, so there was that sort of slightly added pressure. We only fished for 3 days as well, so we were under a proper tight time schedule, really, as well. And it looked like it was going to be ruined, because I forget when we turned up. I think we might have turned up on like a Saturday, so like I don't think we would have been able to get a motor on the Sunday, so it would have been
it was a great narrative, that, because it was all about it
was just me being an unprepared idiot, basically, just kind of bumbling in, just not having prepped properly, chucking everything in the van, and
are you quite a prepared person normally for these sort of trips? Are you?
Yeah, I try and be, and again I think that just comes from all the years teaching. Like, you had to be immaculately prepared really every day, otherwise stuff would dissolve pretty quickly. And I think so I try to be, I'm not, I never turn up with a rig box full of 30 rigs, but I'll always tie sort of what I think I'm going to need for the first night or two, so I don't at least have to tie rigs when I get there and you've done a 10 or 12 or 15 hour drive or whatever. I basically just make sure everything is sweet to try and get rods out as easily as possible on the first night, I think.
I got the impression with topography that losing your mobile phone or something, did that cause some hassle?
No, it was Rich. It was actually Rich's phone. Yeah.
Right, okay.
It wasn't mine. Yeah, no, Rich had lost his phone. It was just inside his bed chair.
We've done that so many times.
Yeah, it was just in his bed chair. Why we didn't check his bed chair at the lake before driving back to the campsite, I'm not sure. But yes, we drove back to the campsite, looked round in the grass for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then got all the kit, because unfortunately Rich's bed chair was at the bottom, basically, because obviously we put all mine up. We're like, well, obviously, Rich, you don't need your kit until tonight when you're going to need it to sleep again. So we put all his at the bottom and put all my fishing kit on top. So we unloaded everything, got his bed chair out, and it was
But people like those sort of backstories as well, don't they? And a little bit going on as well. It seems to add a little bit more character to a film as well.
Totally. They're just the they're just the realities. I always think these days we've got it so easy compared to what the boys 15, 20 years ago used to have to do. Basically before smartphones. These days I can have sat on my Mac at home, looked on Google Earth, worked out access points, looked at past years, looked at water levels being down, found spots, pinned stuff. Do you know what I mean? You can do so much research these days. Back in the day, like, they were just turning up with a wing and a prayer, a load of kit jammed into the back, like an inflatable, like ship boats.
But stepping into the unknown.
And just absolutely loving it, and spoke to sort of some of the guys, like Frank Warwick, who's a good friend, quite a lot about those early days.
I've spoken to Richie about, the first Cassian trips and stuff as well. And,
This little ice cream tub of...
Did you see that in the picture? He's literally got an ice cream tub full of bait, it's just... It was... But they still managed to...
Well.
Exactly. Yeah, they still managed to catch them,
Yeah, I think it's very easy these days, like, to analyse and prep everything down to the nth degree and kind of feel like you know everything and expect everything. But I definitely think there's a hell of a lot to be said for, like, not knowing as much. Definitely, like, some of my favourite trips to Europe still to this day probably were the first ones to Belgium, when I just didn't really know anything about the places that we were fishing. We'd had like a little tip off that there was a few nice ones in this place, and my first bite was like a 47 pounder, Like it's just jet black 47 pounder that was like, you know, looked as incredible and as good as anything that I'd ever caught over here. And I was just like, Jesus Christ, like what? Because it was the unknown. I think there's a lot to be said for that, definitely. And I think I haven't even scratched a tiny bit of the surface of what's out there either. You know, well, you got
the whole of Europe as well, and
it's just so diverse. You know, you can go and fish so many different places. You know, you can fish little canals that you can underarm across, fishing gin clear water in between lily pads, you know, or you can fish big wild like industrial canals, or there's like, you know, the huge, you know, big sort of wild lakes up in northern Germany, you know, all like surrounded by pine forests and stuff like that, or you go and fish the, you know, the raw big barrages down in the south of France that are all dusty and rocky and what have you. You know, there's that's, you know.
And you said with like you know, foreign anglers as well. Are they, you know, they're a little bit still behind us, are they? And
some,
whereabouts are they in terms of?
There's some phenomenal anglers, you know, out there, definitely. I've only sort of come across a tiny cross section, really.
But even for those anglers that are, you know, there's such a small amount of people seriously fishing those waters, you know, in terms of.
Don't get me wrong, like some of the places get some serious pressure. Definitely. You know, it's not all turning up to empty paradise, like at all, far from it. And you know, there's problems with localism, and you know, people not necessarily wanting their waters to become too busy and all that as well. So it's kind of like you know, you're always sort of trying to tread a fine line, really, particularly when you're over there on, you know, someone else's home turf. You know, like every water is somebody's local.
So these untapped waters that you talk about, I mean, are they still fished? You know, are they being fished at the moment, or are they completely unfished waters?
I mean, I in honesty, like the vast majority of the places I've fished so far are sort of like, you know, they're not unfished, kind of, you know, virgin sort of places. Far from it, you know. Most of the places I've fished so far are kind of, they're pretty well known. Some of them, you know, the likes of Salagoo and some of the other places. I kind of, you know, I haven't done any true pioneering really at all. Partly because, you know, I don't know, it's hard. If you're only going out there for a week, which trips often are, like the vast majority of my trips really have been a week. I did that one with Samir, which was 2 weeks, but really the rest they're usually like, you know, 6 nights, 8 nights tops. Really.
What about Nick Hellier's type of fishing? You know, where he jumps in the old car and he's
I would love. I'd love to do more of that. I think sort of, I don't know, like in the position I've been in, perhaps in the last few years and stuff, you're always sort of pressed a little bit as well, because you're, you know, often I've been making a film as well, so you've been filming, you know, real pioneering, that it's a slightly more risky prospect, isn't it, really? You know, heading somewhere where you've just no idea whether there actually is any carp in there or not, and kind of investing, you know, you could easily invest a week just on some of those really big places, just trying to find the carp, you know, let alone catch it and sort of anything else. So
what about with these films then? Are you liaising with Rich and, you know, deciding what you're going to do next, or is it their idea, or how does that work?
It's all pretty loose, really. Yeah, they're happy just to. I think the idea of sort of what we're going to do with them is they're just literally just going to document whatever I fancy doing, really. You know, wherever I fancy going. You know, if I turn around and sort of said to Rich, you know, I fancy going down to like to Cassian, you know, can we make time for that? You know, do you reckon you're up for that? I'm sure Elliot would be like, yeah, like, let's do it. In fact, actually,
have they done anything on there yet?
Elliot messaged me only a couple of weeks ago. He was like, mate, do you fancy going to Bled in November?
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'd absolutely love to. That'd be brilliant. So it's, there's no like grand plan or sort of anything.
But your own personal fishing and your media fishing, you've still got plenty of time to do your own thing. And
yes and no. I hadn't really up sort of this year is the first time that I've done like any significant amount of my own personal fishing for sort of for a good few years, really.
You joined a new water.
This year? Yeah, I did. Yeah, I got. To be fair, I joined 3 new waters actually this year.
Wow.
Yeah, I got 3 new tickets. To be honest, partly sort of when I started doing the big European trips, I was like, this is it. I can't see me doing much more fishing in England. Like, I was just so intoxicated by it and just fell in love with it. I was like, this is all I want to do. And I think I quickly realised that it's incredibly expensive, and it's also expensive in time as well. And I just realised that in reality, there was no way that I could do 4, 5, 6 big European trips a year. It just wasn't feasible. And then obviously lockdown happened. Spent a lot more time at home and closer to home, and just kind of like, I don't know, I think lockdown changed the way that I felt about things a little bit as well. And not that I lost the desire to travel, but I think I actually just really relished slowing down a little bit and spending a bit more time sort of closer to home. So decided to sort of invest a bit of time to try and get some nice UK tickets again. What
sort of criteria do you look for then? What is it nowadays?
Like, ideally not too busy. It's probably one of the main things.
Yeah.
I just want to be able to fish really against the fish themselves. I don't really want to have to fish against other anglers too much. I know it is a bit of an inevitability, and you kind of can, you're never really going to escape that fully. But I think over the years, and just getting older as well, I've been carp fishing for 30 years now. I've spent a lot of time fishing pretty busy lakes. So I think, for me now, fishing quieter places is kind of where I want to be, really. That nice carp obviously is the key thing. But they definitely don't have to be big. One of the lakes that I joined this year is a tiny little estate lake. Hasn't even got a 30-pounder in it.
Club ticket or?
It's just little club ticket. Just little club ticket. It's close to home. Perfect for little work nights. I know I can go down there, catch a few. Some lovely like oldie worldy ones in there. A couple of really old ones, like original Leany stock. So they're sort of like 60 odd years old. Stocked in the 50s.
Not too many of those around nowadays.
No, there's very, very few of those around now. So I caught one of them actually.
Did you?
This summer? Yeah, I caught the second biggest on, I think it was my 4th or 5th night. I caught the second biggest one.
I mean, one of those means a lot, surely. I mean, it's a big.
It's just nice. It's just nice fishing.
Fishing. Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't big. It was like 27 pounds. But yeah, that was lovely, and it's just super peaceful. There's never anybody there. It's like an old tench syndicate, sort of, really. Like a lot of the guys that fish it are tench anglers. It's just beautiful little place. And then the other place is like ultra strict, no publicity, club water, should we say? That's about as much as I can say about it, really. I've had a lovely summer fishing there. So I've fished up there since June. I think I did 5 trips, and I think I ended up with about 52 or 53 bites, and I think caught 48 or 49, something like that.
That's really good.
Yeah, it was, and they were only, a couple of the trips were just 2-nighters, a couple of them were 3. So I don't know how many nights I did. I suppose it would have been 3, 6, 9. Did
you have a lot of history on the lake? And
no, none at all.
Again,
really.
Just going down there and getting bites.
It was just a ticket, to be honest, more than anything, that I took to have some socials with some friends. Actually, really, more than anything. It's a bit of a drive from home, so it's not ideal. I can't just nip in and out, sort of thing. It's I've got to go for at least a couple of nights because it's a good, it's a decent drive from home. But there's some lovely carp in there, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. And because it's like ultra strict, no publicity, I knew that there was absolutely nothing that I could do with the pictures or ever would be able to, which actually is just really lovely.
Doesn't worry
in
you.
a way.
Yeah.
No, like
Yeah.
I spoke to someone the other day, and they were like, "All right, mate, you've been quiet. You're not fished. You haven't fished this summer." And I was like, "No, I've had the best summer's carp fishing of my life, probably.
Yeah.
Caught a couple of big uns. I caught the big common in there on the peak of the full moon. Actually, about, I don't know what it would have been when the last full moon was, 4 or 5 weeks ago. And I caught one of the big mirrors as well, which was my first bite actually. Funny enough, actually, the first couple of bites sort of led to, I think, really why I sort of did pretty well in the other trips. I was basically it's quite a lot of really shallow bars in there, like super shallow, 4-5 foot sort of thing. Tap clear water, loads of birds out there, and I'd taken like tigers, like crushed tiger, some castor, some salt, and boilie with me that first trip, and found a couple of spots, a couple of deeper spots, 10 foot, maybe 12 foot off the edge of the bar, and this. Couldn't find a spot for a third rod, and then found this super shallow spot, but just felt incredible right on the top of this shallow bar. And I was like, oh, is it a bit too... It was like so shallow, I wasn't even really getting a drop. It was like, it was down before.
So what was it then? Why did that feel so good on top of a?
Because it was just bar? Like it taken me about 30 casts to find anything that wasn't just solid weed, and then I just found this tiny little sweet spot.
Oh right.
Felt
lovely.
like about the size of an unhooking mat sort of thing,
Oh,
and it was just like sort of super fine gravel, but just like. Yeah, you almost didn't even have to, like, my kind of benchmark for a super clean spot is, so I always led with the rod to my left like that, and I hold the blank a little bit further up from the reel. You see a lot of guys just do it holding it with the rod here. You don't get very good sort of feel. The further up the rod you hold it, the better. Like
you can feel it through the rod more. Yeah.
But I don't actually hold it, and I pull like really quite slowly and gently as well. Otherwise, you just skip over stuff really easy. And if I can rest the blank on my fingertips open and I can move it across the spot,
that's a nice measure.
That's clean. If I have to curl my fingers a little bit to pull, it ain't that clean. That's my benchmark. And obviously with braid, it doesn't matter whether that's 20 yards out or 60 or 80 or 120.
So how far out was this spot?
I don't know. It was about 50 yards, 60 yards or something. But because it was so shallow, I was like, there's no way I'm getting away with putting any big feed items on there. The birds are just going to kind of decimate it. So I just put a load of salt and castor, basically, little bit of chopped tiger, and just a tiny little tiger hook bait on it. And
Himalayan salt, that sort of thing. Or?
Yeah, just the coarse pink Himalayan stuff. I buy it by like the 10 kilo.
Yeah, is that something you're always using the bait then?
I've used salt for a really long time now.
Not just a seasonal kind of spring thing, or
no. I suppose really like spring, summer, autumn. Never really used it much in the winter. I know Tom talked about using it in the winter actually as well, didn't he?
Yeah.
I have saying that actually, I have used it a little bit in the winter, but not in any sort of quantity. But I'm happy to put like loads in the summer.
What do you think is just a seasoning for the
No, I was putting like a couple of kilos in a night on a spot.
But
so,
what do you think the salt adds to the bait then? Is it
just? I mean, I don't know.
Enhancing everything else.
No, I mean, like I say, I've often fished over just pure salt, just pure salt, no feed item whatsoever, just salt. I think. Have you
seen the fish in the water? How they react to that then?
No, actually, I've never had the opportunity to put it on a margin spot and watch them. I'd love to,
because I would imagine
I've seen what they've done to spots that have been salted in terms of how they've created them out and how they've fed on them. So they must dig. They must really dig the spots.
I mean, they're actually really feeding on it then. Or like when you
just
put
after the minerals.
The minerals, yeah. Like when you put a whole slick in the water and they just come along and ingest it, don't they?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic. I mean, obviously, I'd never encourage sort of like just using that, because you're not giving the carp anything back. You know, you're not actually putting any food of any value into the water. So like, if everyone suddenly just started using loads of salt, carp would never get any bigger, and it would do them no good. Ultimately.
Do you think you need to use a lot of that?
No, I don't think you need to use a lot at all.
Yeah.
I sort of, this summer, I tried using a bit more just as an experiment more than anything. And because I was catching plenty, I was getting loads of feedback really on kind of what was having an impact. So just tried using loads, and it didn't really top out what sort of, you know, it was, it was really, really, I mean, it's kind of like, you know, midsummer, post-spawning, you know, I think they just need those minerals. I think they crave them. And I was putting other bait in as well. So I was putting, like I say, on that super shallow spot, really, it was mainly just because of the birds. That was the main reason that I put it on there, because obviously the birds aren't going to dive on salt because, you know, they can't really see it, and it's, you know.
Everything coming off that spot, just that one spot, was it?
That first trip, yeah. So I caught a big mirror first morning, which sort of blew me away, really. I'd only had my rods in the lake, sort of. I only put them out just before dark and first light. Woke up to a bite with one of the big ones on the end. Yeah. Caught another one that morning, a really nice common. And then caught another one the following night as well, really beautiful linear. And then all the trips after that, I started using a lot of castor and salt, basically.
Moving around the lake as well?
Yeah. Fished like 4, 5, 6 different swims, different areas. And just wherever I put that mix, it would do 2, 3, 4, 5 bites a night. I think one trip I had 17. One trip I had 14. Another trip I had 10.
That's crazy, because I mean it's carnage.
It was carnage.
It's not necessarily regarded as a real runs water anyway, is it? So no. You're giving them something they like there, Gaz, aren't you?
Yeah. I think I just sort of stumbled upon something perhaps that no one else was doing, and I mean it was expensive. Like I was taking sort of, you know, 10, 12. I think on the sort of on the 3-nighters I might have taken about 15 pints of castor.
Oh, right.
As well.
Well, that is expensive.
It was expensive, yeah. Getting them from Ringwood Tackle, my local. You know, and yeah, so that was undoubtedly making a difference.
Yeah, I mean,
I know there's a couple. Again, I sort of did it as a bit of an experiment, because it was kind of fishing that was like no strings in a way, you know. Obviously, I'm not filming. I can't write about it, so it doesn't matter if I blank. It doesn't matter if I catch loads. It doesn't matter. So it was quite nice, because it could be a bit experimental, really. And
what about hook bait wise and the way you're presenting rigs over that?
Tiny little balanced tigers on quite big hooks, really. So like big sort of size 4s, but just balanced, so they, you know, sit with the sort of point up like that. Yeah,
sort of sitting over a bit.
So the point of the hook is sort of resting on the bottom.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a waft. It's quite critically balanced.
Yeah, so I always make sure that it definitely hits the deck.
Yeah.
If it's kind of just ghosting around above the bottom, you're just going to damage the point.
Yeah.
And also B, when you've got big carp moving around the rig as well, you don't want it to be moving around too much.
It's wafting around too much.
So it's kind of sorry, excuse me.
It happens.
I was sick last week. I'm still in recovery. I had a bit of a cold and flu, so it's still there. So it's kind of a fine point, but you definitely don't want it too lightly balanced. But all the hook holds are amazing. I only lost a couple. Had some savage battles with the weed. One mirror came in like, no word of a lie, the biggest weed bed I've ever seen. Genuinely was as big as a car. You know, you always hear stories, don't you? People, I pulled a weed bed in as big as a car. And you're like, whatever, mate. Yeah. Like this one genuinely was. And I actually woke my mate up to show him, and he was like, he couldn't really understand that I'd got it in. I was like, no, I know. I was like, I don't understand how that's coming either. Just this whole massive, colossal bed of Canadian had just uprooted and come in with this like lovely mid-30 mirror just plugged in the middle of it.
It's lovely unwrapping the weed though, isn't it? And actually finding something in there.
Yeah, I was convinced that there would be nothing in there. But yeah, so, you know, all the hook holds were
I always remember your little
Only lost
dainty
a
little
couple.
combi rigs. I bet a lot of people used to use those after.
Loads of people still use them.
Yeah,
and,
still use those.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Dan went on to use them quite a bit as well, and obviously Korda does the the quick change version of it and stuff now, which is obviously is a great way for anyone to do it. Because the Albright knot was always a bit of a ball ache to tie, and it's tricky unless you've got a bit of finesse. It's tricky to keep it as short as you want it to be.
Yeah.
There's a definite trick to do it, and it's easy. But if you've only watched something online or whatever, it's hard to get the right sort of finesse to do it. But
how important do you think that bit of putty was on there as well? Because just a bit of putty above, just above the hook there. I know, I
always fish that rig as a pop up.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people fish it now as like a balanced bottom bait rig or whatever else, but I always fished it as a pop-up. Basically, that I designed it so I could fish a tiny pop-up, 10 or 12 mil pop-up, which back then weren't really being used sort of all that much. Really, it was sort of like, bigger pop-up rigs, the hinge and sort of stuff like that were in use regularly, which really you need a really buoyant sort of 14 or at least a 16.
It went the opposite a little bit to that, didn't it?
I really wanted to fish these kind of tiny little hook baits that I was making, but I wanted to fish them on a rig that kind of still had some of the same mechanics as a hinge, with a stiff boom that would lay out, that would reset itself, and so on and so forth. But I wanted to fish it really low to the deck.
The hook, it used to sit over a bit, didn't it?
Yeah, like I didn't want to fish it like a hinge.
No.
Couple of inches off the bottom. I wanted it to be as low to the so I always used to keep the braid bit as short as possible and always fished it as a pop-up. But I mean, I still fish like my balanced tigers, how I fish them now. I have like pretty much the same sized piece of putty on the break, kind of between the stiff section of hook link and the supple bit.
I think that makes a difference.
Yeah, I think it just helps it kind of helps the little balanced hook bait stay in the right spot on the bottom, and again, not just be kind of up all over the place. And it just helps turn the hook as well. And
do you find, I mean, where you're hooking fish as well, it's pretty consistent when you start using putty on there as well. Do you find most of them middle sort of centre lip?
Yeah, really, give or take. Sometimes it can be a little bit here or there, but to be honest, fishing over sort of 3 or 4 pints of caster, the way they're feeding on that sort of stuff, you're going to get hook holds that are sort of all over the shop because it's such light bait, and I imagine it looks like chaos down there when they're feeding on it. There must be bits mid-water, and that I'm sure they're taking stuff that's up off the bottom as well. I remember watching some of the Carp. I remember watching Pearly Tail like wafting bait off the bottom with her pecs and taking stuff. Well,
you mentioned the hardwick linear at Manor as well.
Yep.
I mean, that's a good example of that as well.
Yeah, I mean that. I think really that was a case of the water was so shallow, and the little bag that I dropped out there just looked too blatant for it, basically. So it's approached it. I was stalking right in the back of the little bay. It's over on the riverbank behind Whitney Point. And it was only really early in the year. I think it was like late February or early March, I think it was. Found a few in the back of that bay and just kind of went round with a single rod to stalk. And I've put this little, because you can't spom maggots there, but you can use them in a bag. So this little tiny maggot rig, and it was only like a squash ball sized, PVA bag. It wasn't massive. Little underarm. It's dropped onto the gravel. Beautiful. It's laid out. It's melted. I remember thinking, shit, that looks quite blatant in the clear water. It was like a side plate of pure bright white on the bottom. I remember sort of cringing a little bit, thinking, I don't know. I was like, be interested to see how they react. And anyway, like first time that one came in, it's obviously clocked it, decided it didn't like it, and as it's turned, all the maggots come up off the bottom, and it's just kind of spread itself out. And then it came back in 5 minutes later from the other direction, started feeding, and it only had like 2 mouthfuls, clocked the little bunch. I think I only had about maybe 7 white maggots balanced. It's clocked him straight away, picked it up, hooked itself, and that was that. It was like 36 and a half pounds.
Yeah, nice. And like you say, I mean, you wonder, don't you, if it didn't do that to the bag, didn't disperse the bait, or how many bites you're getting once the fishes came in and actually spread the bait around a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, from all the underwater films that we watched, it was clear that was happening. Certainly on those heavily stocked places, that was happening all the time. I mean, I don't use bags like at all really.
Solid
ever
bags
these days. No, any.
Yeah.
I don't
What,
use
for
little
that reason? Just,
yeah, because I just like, partly because of how I want my link to lay out, and I'm convinced that it lays out so much better when it's just the hook bait and it's not going down with the bag. And also just because I just don't think it stays there for too long. If you've got silvers and stuff in there, or tench or whatever, I think the bags often get...
You often wonder with solid bags, don't you? I mean, if anyone leaves a solid bag out overnight, and you know...
How often are you getting a bite just on a single?
It's got to happen.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing that I did was I switched to using leg clips as well. And I'm convinced... So that I've used, to put it into context, I've used helicopters for, I don't know, 20 years, 15 years, almost exclusively, apart from fishing at kind of like mega range. I just switched to leg clips again as a little bit of an experiment, and off the back of something that someone had said to me about that they were convinced that leg clips are basically just better. For most situations.
What, just more direct? I mean, you're
more direct. How it lays the hook link out as well. So using a leg clip with a little anti-tangle sleeve, you chuck that in the edge, and because of the anti-tangle sleeve and the little bit of stiffness of the link, they just lay out so perfectly and so beautifully every time. Whereas if you chuck a heli in the edge like that, they don't do that at all. Sometimes it falls to the side, sometimes it falls can fall back along the lead core, sometimes it sits a bit. But I think with them leg clips and it being pushed out, I just think they sit perfectly every time.
And you found a difference with that as well,
yeah, and also they just never tangle. Whereas with helis, you do get the occasional tangle, especially with the tiny little hook baits that I use often, stuff like that. I'm always ultra fussy watching the cast through the air. If it spins, I'd wind it in. Like as soon as it starts spinning, if I cast and like 20 yards through the air, it starts like that, I'll just feather it down as quickly as I can, wind in and cast again. I want it to fly like straight and true, like the whole way down. If I see it or if it looks like it's flown too close to the lead core, it might have just...
How often do you wind it in then and it is tangled? Yeah,
you would always get that, like even being ultra careful like that, and I'm really careful with all my casting. It's like got to hit the clip just right as well. It can't hit it too hard, can't catch it too late. I think the worst casts for encouraging tangles are the ones that just clip the cast, hit the clip, just a little bit late, and it's like clipping in.
Or sort of
clipping it. I just think it like
balls up together
as it hits the water and the clip. I'm sure it just encourages it just to whip up the lead core. And what sort of most people don't do, which I've always done, wind it in the morning, even if it looks like it's not tangled, hold your link like that, take the weight out of it, hold the link, and you'll see straight away how it's been sat overnight. If it's any kind of a coated hook link, you'll see it because they've got a memory to them. So if there's even the tiniest little kink or curve or something in that link, it's not been sat right.
Wow,
it's probably been sat around the leg core.
Right. Right.
Sometimes you just see a little tiny, almost like imperceptible kink, like midway down, and it's been sat pinned under the leg core.
Good tip.
Tiny thing, but so that and smelling my leads is something that I do religiously every single time I wind in. What
don't you like? I mean, we were fishing the other week actually, and I mean the spot I was on was it was still reasonably hard, but I mean it absolutely stunk.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
where was that?
It was on an embryo lake.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I mean,
did it smell sour or did it smell? It's probably got
a heavy kind of silty sort of smell to it. A real heavy silt. It's, you're strong enough to really over flavour the
I mean, I don't mind like clean silt. Doesn't really smell. It smells of silt, but I always think it doesn't smell bad. Clean silt. I think
it didn't smell bad. It was just really, really strong. It was a really strong silty smell.
I mean, it might have just had some rotten bait on it. I think.
Yeah,
you can
there's no
usually
bait in
tell
the
sort
lake.
of. Oh, okay.
Nothing goes in there.
Oh, okay.
No.
I mean, it's obviously just this. I mean, I would just probably say it's a spot that doesn't get fed on regularly, and probably is one that's not worth focusing on.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I set a lot of store by how good the lead smells when it comes in, especially on heavily fished places, because I remember there was a few spots on the car park that I did nights on certain spots. Smelt the lead in the morning, it just smelt rancid, and you just know straight away that it's covered in rotten bait, or it's had rotten bait on it a month or so previous, and it's still a bit sour or something like that. And I think when you're sort of limited to the bank, you've got to use every trick that you possibly can to try and work out what's going on them spots.
And good smells
out
for you
in the lake.
When you're thinking, that's
ideally
good.
You want it to smell of nothing. Like super clean spots, literally your lead will smell of nothing.
Good tips.
Your lead will smell nothing.
Yeah.
And I always smell the lead core in that as well.
Yeah. If
but
it comes by not smelling of anything, it's great.
Yeah. But the kink in the link thing.
Yeah.
Something you sort of don't really see many people do, but because most people use coated links these days.
So do you think if it?
And also, I suppose what I should say, which I didn't, is like I'm fastidious as well about steaming it just before it goes out.
Yeah.
And sort of once I've steamed it, I won't handle that link again. So I'll steam it and it'll get hung off my brolly. So I know I've cast it out and it is ruler straight. So if it doesn't come in ruler straight, it's not been sat right, basically.
You think if it is kinked, it's definitely not fishing, though?
No, it might still be fishing. I remember when they did Carpology did some of the underwater stuff with Rob Hughes, and some lads' rigs were sat like really good, successful carp anglers. Some of their rigs were sat shockingly badly, tangled every cast, like just awful loop, like big loops in the booms and all sorts.
Yeah, they were interesting.
So you're always guessing.
But listening to this for anybody though, I mean, it is literally just putting all those percentages together. That's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just that it's just that level of finesse, a bit like we were talking about, right at the beginning. Actually, I think about sort of making sure everything is as right as you can possibly make it. They're only quick and easy things to do. It doesn't take any more time really to do those things than it does to put out.
Yeah, it's just being more diligent, isn't it? And just looking out for those things.
Yeah, totally.
Actually, Gaz, normally at the start of the show we ask for a nice gift. At the end of the show we're going to ask you, have you got a nice gift for us?
I have.
Great. Okay.
Are we at the end?
Well, we're pretty much we're drawing close. Yeah.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. So this is so it's a framed cover of.
Have you got that there, Tope?
Of the third sub.
Yeah. That's on camera.
Signed as well by a bunch of the contributors.
Oh, that's great.
So I just thought that'd be a nice little memento. And as we talked about it a bit.
We're filling the studio up with
some nice
now.
solid English oak as well. Framed.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
No, so sort of before we wrap the show up, I mean, so what's going on and
what's going on now?
Yeah, what's going on for the rest of the year and future plans?
So I'm out filming again with SIP next week, Tuesday to Thursday, I think, or Friday. I think up at Farlow's. So
that's a bit different for you, isn't it?
Yeah, but I still, like I was saying to you earlier, like I still thoroughly enjoy the challenge of catching carp from anywhere. Like it doesn't matter where it's from. I still love that. And fished Farlow's a little bit back in the day, caught some nice ones long time ago. Haven't been back there for a long time. Still some amazing carp in there. And Ellen Rich were quite keen for me to do what, even though most of the films are either going to be like sort of my own fishing or travel films, European stuff and that, they were quite keen for me to do sort of one like UK day ticket type piece, so more sort of session type piece. So that's next week, so really looking forward to that. Haven't checked the rules yet, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to take a load of castor and salt. So we'll see. I need to check the rules first. Obviously, they might.
Well, this podcast will be going out around that sort of time anyway. Okay, so people hear that, they'll be turning out there with salt and casters now as well, won't they? Yeah,
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I'm a massive fan of boilies, and I think boilies are amazing for picking big fish out.
Would you move on to be at boilies typically at this time of the year?
Well, actually, do you know what? Strangely, I've always been a bit of a boilie angler, like through the summer, and then for a long while, I've actually switched to introducing some naturals as well, kind of in the autumn, because I've often felt that like actually the carp have seen a lot of bait all year, and actually something different this time of year can trip them up, because they're quite a long way through the pressure cycle now. Some of them might have been caught 2 or 3 times. They've seen bait week in, week out these days since like February, March. So I think, sometimes something a little bit different this time of year can make a difference. I got a couple of the last bites of the year when I fished Dinton. The first season that I fished it on maggot, switched to maggot, fishing like pure maggot, actually, nothing else. And
fishing over a lot of maggots as well.
Yeah, fishing over sort of like 6-8 pints, something like that. So like a gallon, I suppose. But yes, I think that can sometimes be good this time of year. But every water's different. Some waters, everybody's doing that sort of thing these days, and you're probably better going in with straight 18 millers, and a big spread. So it's horses for courses, like everything. It's just reading the situation, I think, is the key thing. So so that's that. And then the week after that, I'm off to France with Charles, who's my partner, for sub. So we're going on a little bit of a road trip mission. Just personal fishing, really. If we catch anything special, we might sort of film it, but it's just a fun mission. So really looking forward to that. Not 100% sure where we're going to go yet. We've got a couple of ideas for venues, but kind of going to see what the weather does and kind of how it pans out. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, going out to fish and film with Samir in late November in Spain at Orellana, with a bit of luck.
That'd be good. They've got a good little number as well, those two, haven't they? They seem to, get around a little bit, don't they?
Yeah, they've got like I'm like, I feel like I owe Samir quite a bit, really, because of how he sort of influenced how my fishing has gone. Yeah. And I just love the fact that they've followed their dream to its sort of conclusion in a way. Although it's certainly not the end, but you know what I mean. They've kind of sacrificed like a hell of a lot as well. He had a really successful business and a life and family and everything back here. Like, he worked incredibly hard. Like, and he worked unbelievably hard to sort of make his fishing happen and to make time for it. Like, he'd work flat out, like ridiculous work ethic when he was at home to make space for his big trips and stuff. So they've
been doing that for a while now.
To sell up, well, they moved out there just on the cusp of lockdown, didn't they? They pulled like 2 all-nighters, didn't they, to load the van and get the last stuff out. And I think they got the last Eurotunnel crossing before it closed before lockdown. So fair play to them for making it happen. And I've pretty much never come across anyone that is as like eternally buzzed up, other than Tom Stokes maybe, about their fishing. And like, you just, you can't help but want to surround yourself with people like that and stuff. And
positivity and
what
it's infectious, isn't it?
It is. And like we were chatting about before, like, I think doesn't matter what you're doing, wherever, I've said it before, but like wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whether you're fishing for like barbel on the on the river, or like big roach, or
bit
whatever,
bass fishing at the moment,
of bass fishing, or whether you're like riding down hills, it doesn't matter what you're doing, as long as you're really enjoying it. Like, that's the only thing. I just think that's the only thing that matters.
And I guess that this is something that you've learned, especially over the last few years as well. This is the big thing that you can take from everything.
Totally. Like, if you're loving it, keep doing it, keep chasing it, and then if for whatever reason you're not, then just kind of switch it up and find something that does kind of keep you stoked and motivated. And because you know what I mean,
life's too short.
Life is too short. Life is too short.
Yeah,
definitely.
All right, Gaz, pleasure having you on the show. I'm really glad that you've eventually been able to come on. It's great. It's been great.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
The Thinking Tackle Podcast.